Chapter 1171. Replenishing life for the peacock tree. These slightly green branches continued to stretch even further while inside the tree, as if they were going through the peacock tree's trunk all the way underground to reach every root. This is... Kong Qinru was slightly stunned by this. Although a tree father would die and turn into these trees, no one could violate or shake them. Even an immortal emperor would have trouble doing so. But now, Li Qie could control these branches to drill into the tree father's body before going underground. Any spectator would be dumbfounded by this scene. Li Qie closed his eyes. He wanted to use the myriad-age tree to check the peacock tree. As a tree father, the peacock tree was an untouchable existence. However, the myriad-age tree was different. It was something nearly comparable to the longevity grass. Moreover, Li Qie had no malicious intentions. He was only checking the peacock tree in order to make a comprehensive diagnosis. After a good while, he opened his eyes and told Kong Qinru, "Let's go." With that, he reached out with his finger. With a buzz, a door was opened. Before she could calm down, he dragged her to a different location. They reappeared at the bottom of the sea in front of an underwater cliff. This was the bottom of Peacock Land. She was shocked once again. Li Qie could freely travel through space while locking onto a coordinate with incredible precision. This was the most frightening and heaven-defying method of travel she had seen yet. At this second, she didn't know how powerful Li Qie was, for his techniques had exceeded her comprehension. Li Qie placed his palm on the cliff, allowing Dao lines to emerge to form abstruse runes. Even a genius like Kong Qinru couldn't understand them in the slightest. The emerging runes eventually intertwined to form a portal. Li Qie once again pulled the dazed girl into a different realm. She turned a bit silly while standing in this realm. The space inside was vast, as if it was an entirely different world. One wouldn't be able to see the end of this space. Gigantic dragons were dancing in the sky in all kinds of shapes and forms. Some were lying there, others were descending while more were coiling about. However, upon a closer inspection, it turned out that these beings were not dragons but gigantic roots. These were the peacock tree's roots. However, it was much more majestic than how it was described because they were simply too large. A few of them shouldered hills of accumulated mud, while other roots even had waterfalls running down from them. When one looked up high, many bright flashing stars could be seen in the sky. These are the peacock tree's roots? She was quite shaken to see this. The tree father had turned into a tree after death, but this world was completely inaccessible to outsiders. It was because these roots were the foundation of the tree father. If they were damaged, the land created by the tree would be damaged as well. "Don't be fooled by its magicalness," Li Qie lightly said. "This place is at its end and extremely close to exhaustion. Otherwise, it would be even more magnificent." This reminder made her look twice. At this time, she noticed that these thick and huge roots were quite close to death, while some had withered already. If all of them did, then the tree itself would die. Li Qie walked around these roots and observed every one of them. If necessary, he would cut off a lot of these roots. She followed right behind him as he was making the assessment. She wasn't an alchemist and didn't understand the tree father's situation after returning to the earth. The only thing she could do was follow him and assist if asked. After a careful observation, he finally stood before the main root that was as large as a great mountain. At this time, he opened his fate palace to release the ancestor ginseng, the immortal injury peony, the 12 transformations dragon silkworm soulgrass. After seeing something like a true dragon soaring and howling in the sky, Kong Qinru stammered, 12 transformation soulgrass. The dragon soulgrass had been cultivating non-stop. More importantly, it had absorbed many good items, such as the roots of the phoenix ginseng as well as the pinnacle life water. She was shocked to see all of these immortal grasses. No, they were existences even above immortal grasses. The exquisite valley didn't have any of them. In fact, in the entire heaven spirit world, very few lineages could have immortal-level medicines, let alone things like these. These things, she couldn't form a coherent thought at this moment. She finally understood what Li Qie meant earlier about how she couldn't provide the things he truly wanted. There was no need to think any further. She had to admit that few would be able to provide what he truly wanted in this world. He had this many existences even above the immortal level. What other things could actually tempt him? Something like a 12 transformations soulgrass was unheard of, let alone seeing one in person. "All right, listen up." Li Qie clapped while looking at the happy grasses. Here is a mission for everyone. Go into the main root and inject some essence and vitality into it. Incredible. This is the main root of a tree father. Even the ancestor ginseng commented emotionally while looking at the enormous main root. It took a good look and continued. This tree father is dying for sure. It won't be easy to save it without spending a massive amount of essence. Li Qie commanded. Don't worry, you won't do it for nothing. Now try your best. We were waiting to hear those words. The ginseng cheered after hearing this. All of them quickly plunged into the main root. Even for them, replenishing the tree father's life was very difficult due to the great price. However, Li Qie had more pinnacle life water. This was a great tonic for them. Can they do it? Kong Qinru asked. Li Qie smiled and shook his head. Life replenishment for a tree father isn't so simple. This is only the beginning. We are recovering some of its vitality before carrying out the more drastic measures. He glanced over the other thick roots and said, wait until it is a bit stronger. We will have to sever a lot of these roots or else it will die. Can it be done? She was quite worried. Cutting these roots would be a great loss for the tree, so of course it would be met with resistance. Even though the peacock tree was on the verge of death, it was still an existence that could easily kill god kings even in this state. It will agree. Li Qie said, if we don't chop off a large number of roots, they will consume more vitality and essence since all of them require these resources for replenishment. Although it won't be easy for it in the beginning after losing these roots, it will be much easier after this hurdle, and I'll save a huge amount of resources as well. She asked, how much time will this process take? It will take some time. You need to be ready for when I ask for help from your valley about certain things. He answered apathetically. For Li Qie, this was not a challenging matter. After all, he had even revived the myriad age tree before, let alone a simple life replenishment. However, there were two different methods for this process. If Li Qie wanted to finish things quickly, he would use the pinnacle life water. That would save him a lot of time and alchemy ingredients. However, this water was too precious to him. He would only use an extremely minuscule amount to act as the leading ingredient for the peacock tree. The true life replenishment would come from the other medicines using a different method. The truth was that Li Qie wouldn't be the only one to think this way. Even if immortal emperors had some pinnacle life water, they wouldn't necessarily use it to replenish someone else's life. It was too precious, much more precious than any immortal medicine. Thus, in order to minimize the amount of pinnacle life water spent, he would have to utilize a slower method. Chapter 1172. Tangji. When eventually, Li Qie looked at the bunch of grasses connecting to the main root of the peacock tree before telling Kong Qinru, come, we have a lot of things to do. With that, he turned and left. After returning to the resting point of the exquisite valley, he wrote down a long list and handed it to her. Go gather these things for me as fast as possible. She carefully scanned the list. It contained many things such as pills and alchemy ingredients among other strange items. Some were quite common while others were even poisonous. She put the list away and cupped her fists to say, young noble Li, don't worry, I will personally go back to the exquisite valley. While I'm not here, just tell the other disciples if you ever need anything. They will take care of it for you. Li Qie needed too many things that were quite precious, so she had to personally take a trip back. After she left, Li Qie carried out his own business. He truly had too many things to do, such as working hard to sever the roots of the peacock tree. Moreover, he had to once more climb to the peak to prepare a grand stage for the entire land. This was indeed a great price to pay for life replenishment. Alchemy materials alone weren't enough, so Kong Qinru couldn't afford to pay this price. This tree used to be a tree father. The difficulty of this life replenishment was not much different from revitalizing an immortal emperor. Even with minimizing the use of pinnacle life water, the other method was quite expensive. It required a lot of life force, so Li Qie had to prepare this stage for the final moment. While he did all of this, the valley maintained a steady stream of materials to him. Kong Qinru was very determined in this process. She spent painstaking efforts to gather the massive amount of materials and expensive treasures. Even as the master, she couldn't decide it all by herself due to the sheer amount that was involved. In order to do so, she worked hard to convince the other ancestors of the valley and gained their support. Due to the constant supply of materials, Li Qie's plan was moving along quite smoothly. On this day, Li Qie was at the top of the Peacock Peak and was using the myriad heavenly cauldron to unclog the blocked runic lines of the peacock tree. He controlled the cauldron with one hand and its fire with the other. This flame poured into the tree like a type of liquid. Because of its age, many of its runic channels were blocked. By doing this, it would buy a lot more time for the tree. However, in order to replenish its life, Li Qie must get through all the blocked channels. Otherwise, its blood energy and essences would be quite limited, so the entire process would be meaningless. As he was clearing through these impassable channels, someone came to worship the peacock tree once more. It was the descendant of the Heaven Vine Citadel that Li Qie had met before, Tang Jiwen. The same three old men were following behind him. The moment Tang Jiwen reached the top, he saw Li Qie burning the tree and immediately shouted in shock. "Stop, what are you trying to do?" He was a tree ant, so as one of its disciples, he was full of admiration for an existence like the peacock tree. So now, after seeing someone actually burning the tree father, he was astounded and wanted to stop the perpetrator. When he rushed over to see Li Qie's cauldron pouring an endless amount of fire into the tree trunk, he was completely stunned. The elders following him were stunned as well. Their Heaven Vine Citadel was also a lineage with a tree father, so they understood these great existences very well. Naturally, this scene was certainly astonishing. Tang Jiwen asked in disbelief. What are you doing?" Earlier when he told Li Qie to stop, it was just an instinctive reaction. Coming from the Heaven Vine Citadel, he naturally knew that ordinary people couldn't harm this ancestral tree that used to be a tree father. Li Qie revealed a mysterious smile and spoke in a profound manner. "Life replenishment for the peacock tree." Life replenishment? Tang Jiwen and the three old men stared at each other. If this was a joke, then it certainly wasn't a funny one. However, all four of them were speechless at this moment. If others were to say this, they would be amused by the joke. However, the scene unraveling before them was too far removed from a joke. Li Qie didn't look like he was joking. More importantly, he could actually invade the peacock tree. This was simply inconceivable. When a tree father turned into an ancestral tree, it wouldn't keep its original sentience, it would become just like other trees. However, there was one aspect that was different. These ancestral trees were extremely powerful. Even immortal emperors wouldn't be able to invade them easily. It didn't matter if the peacock tree had given permission or Li Qie used a special technique, this was still a heaven-defying matter and definitely not a joke. The four of them then watched Li Qie add more gushing fire into the body of the tree. After a long while, Li Qie withdrew the flames and the cauldron. This was enough time to ameliorate these blocked runic pathways. Before leaving, he glanced at Tang Jiwen and smiled. Life replenishment isn't such an easy matter. He drifted away coolly after leaving behind those words. Meanwhile, the four of them were still astounded, unable to say anything. A long time after Li Qie left, the group finally calmed down. Tang Jiwen looked at the old man next to him and asked, "Third uncle, do you think this is possible?" The old man pondered for a moment before replying, "I really haven't heard of life replenishment for an ancestral tree before. These are unfathomable existences. This task is probably as difficult as trying to prolong an immortal emperor's life." A different old man added, "Although it's pure speculation, there is only one possibility. He is an alchemy emperor. Only an alchemy emperor would be able to replenish the life of an ancestral tree." At this time, Tang Jiwen touched the spot Li Qie was pouring fire into, but there were no signs of charring. It looked as if the peacock tree had opened a hole for Li Qie to pour in the fire. Life replenishment for an ancestral tree, he muttered to himself in a daze. Eventually, he composed himself and told the old man, "Third uncle, go back and tell the elders that I won't be coming back for now." This old man was surprised to hear this and retorted, "You can't, all of the elders are coming out now for your assessment. If you miss this chance, you will be handing the Citadel Lord's position to someone else." Tang Jiwen was only one of the descendants from the Citadel. He had another strong competitor that was not lesser than him in either background or ability. Because of this, the position for the main successor had yet to be decided. Tang Jiwen was touring the world and offered his respects to the different ancestral trees in order to learn the Tao. Through this, he wanted to enhance his strength to pass the assessment of the ancestors. But now, he actually said that he wasn't going back. This made the people near him jump in shock. A different old man worriedly spoke to persuade him. "That's right, this assessment is of utmost importance. If you miss it, I'm afraid your chances of becoming the Citadel Lord will become slim. Tang Jiwen took a deep breath and earnestly said, I know the gravity of the situation, but I will still remain here. Everyone, don't worry. I understand the implications very well. The three old men glanced at each other. They couldn't do anything if Tang Jiwen had made up his mind. Kong Qinru returned from the exquisite valley. All of the supplies Li Qie specified had been brought in full. With enough materials, Li Qie began to perform the finishing touches for the stage he was building at Peacock Land. He had been through all the locations here, including the oceans nearby, and nailed down formation arrays. The center was done as well. After finishing the final preparations, he could breathe easy. He looked down at his work from the mountain before casually entering a tavern in a nearby town. He leisurely ordered some dishes and sat by a window. After being served, he slowly poured wine into his cup as if he was waiting for someone. Chapter 1173. Deal with Tang Jiwen. While leisurely drinking his wine at the tavern, someone finally came. It was Tang Jiwen, followed by the three old men. Li Qie gave a faint smile after seeing him and said, You all have been following me for a long time now, so this can't be a coincidence. Tang Jiwen didn't hide anything after hearing this. He came forward and bowed. This little brother's name is Tang Jiwen of the Heaven Vine Citadel. Sir, I admire you, so I have decided to stay here to watch you. Please excuse us. He was quite polite and candid. As someone from a tree father's lineage, he was not arrogant at all. This was quite rare. Li Qie glanced at him and said, If I cared about it, you wouldn't be standing here and talking to me right now. Having said that, he tapped on the table with his finger. Tang Jiwen bowed again with cupped fists before sitting down. He looked at Li Qie but was quite hesitant, for he was searching for the right words. Li Qie chuckled. Speak, my time is very precious, so I can't sit here all day to entertain you. Tang Jiwen took a deep breath and spoke. Sir, you have a supreme Tao of alchemy. Your techniques are wonderful, to be able to see your method of revival. No need to flatter me. Li Qie waved his sleeve with a smile. I know my alchemy Tao is supreme and matchless. I am the best alchemist in the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Tang Jiwen was suddenly dumbfounded. If Li Qie praised himself like that, there was no need for him to say anything else. He lamented this situation deep inside. Other people would start acting quite humble, but this person actually boasted even more. Tang Jiwen went straight to the point after making up his mind. Sir, can you really replenish the life of an ancestral tree? Li Qie gave a mysterious smile. I can also cure your ancestral vine. After the calamity, its situation should be quite bad. Tang Jiwen's expression shifted as he stood up and took several steps back. The chair behind him was knocked down in the process. The three old men had similar expressions. They stared at Li Qie intensely, making the situation tense. This was because only the upper echelons of the Citadel knew about this matter. Tang Jiwen was a descendant-level disciple, so he knew as well. Ordinary disciples didn't know about it. Li Qie sat there nonchalantly while sipping more wine. Don't have any stupid thoughts such as killing me to keep it a secret, or I'll bury you under the peacock tree as fertilizer. In just a moment, the elders glanced at each other. They didn't know what kind of power this man before them had, but they didn't dare to act carelessly. Tang Jiwen took a deep breath and gently waved his hand towards the three elders. They then converged their auras and slowly retreated to the side. He went back to the table and cupped his fists. Sir, you are quite well informed. May I ask how you found out about this? Li Qie lazily replied. Why dwell on this dull topic? Not too many things in this world can hide from me. You stayed behind to see my Tao of alchemy, so this is naturally what you were aiming for. Tang Jiwen responded. Sir, the truth is that this little brother is very interested in your Tao of alchemy. After all, very few people in history are capable of such a feat. Li Qie waved his hand dismissively. There's no need to waste time with pleasantries. You just want to ask me to save your ancestral tree. Sir, you are correct. He knew he couldn't hide it any longer and decisively stated. I do have this thought simply because your Tao of alchemy is matchless. Requesting my service is not difficult, but you need to be mentally prepared. My asking price is very high. With that, Li Qie turned around and left. However, he left one last message as he was walking away. You better decide soon. My time is precious. If you miss this opportunity, it will be your lifelong regret. Tang Jiwen mulled over the situation in the silence left in Li Qiye's wake. One of the old men said, "Asking an outsider with an unclear background to cure our tree father is too dangerous. I'm afraid the ancestors will not agree." A different one nodded as he echoed this sentiment. "We don't know anything about this person. It is still too early to know if his Tao of alchemy is actually matchless or not. If he can do it, then the decision will be easy. If he can't, it will be a big disadvantage to you. Your opponent will use this against you and, with one misstep, you will never be able to redeem yourself. At that time, not to mention competing for the position of the Citadel Lord, you might not even have a place to stay in the city." "I know that full well." Tang Jiwen wryly smiled. "But if he is truly a master, isn't this a once-in-lifetime opportunity? In the present times, how many people in the heaven spirit world actually have the ability to cure a tree father?" He paused with a sigh. "I know. The wise decision is to recognize the complexity that lies within and focus on winning the position of the Citadel Lord first. However, if we truly miss this chance, then it would be a huge regret for our whole city." That might be true, but such a great event should be decided by the elders. The old man called Third Uncle said, "Just focus on becoming the Lord for now. If you are truly determined, it won't be too late after you take the position." "But the issue is, will this opportunity wait for us?" He replied, "If he is truly able to replenish the peacock tree, then it shows just how heaven-defying his alchemy is. He would become famous the moment he successfully carries out this task. At that time, people all over the world, including many imperial lineages and tree father heritages, will come begging him to prolong their ancestors' life and trees. And once the 9 worlds are reconnected, there would be an even larger world in front of him. Even more would kneel before him to ask for life replenishment." Tang Jiwen said, "At that point, he will be the ultimate alchemist. Would he bother looking at us then? It's just as he had put it. This will become our lifelong regret." The man called Third Uncle responded, "But these are only his words. He might not have this ability. Otherwise, he would be famous already. Some things in this world can't be judged with common sense. The world is too vast with many great and eccentric people." Tang Jiwen said with a tinge of helplessness, "In my opinion, he isn't a man of empty words. Without absolute confidence, no one would say such things. It is unwise to deceive and offend our Heavenvine Citadel unless he is powerful enough." After hearing this, the 3 old men glanced at each other. One of them said, "Even if you believe so, the other ancestors might not necessarily agree with you." Tang Jiwen took a deep breath and replied, "Rest assured, I will certainly be able to convince them. I'm confident in this." The 3 old men had nothing else to say after seeing that Tang Jiwen had made up his mind. In fact, his foresight was one of the reasons why he was a top candidate to become the Citadel Lord. Li Qiye went back to the Exquisite Valley's abode for several days and, sure enough, Tang Jiwen came to find him. Kong Qinru asked, "Young noble, were you waiting for him to come?" She knew that Li Qiye was no joke. If he didn't wish for it, Tang Jiwen wouldn't be here right now. "Yes. I have been waiting for him to come since I do need to go to the Heavenvine Citadel." Li Qiye chuckled. "The Heavenvine Citadel?" She was surprised and asked, "What about the peacock tree then?" Li Qiye shook his head in response. "Can't rush this matter. We have done what we need to do for now. Give it time to digest. When the time is right, I will carry out the last step." He looked at her and continued, "This is mainly because in order to have a successful replenishment, we still need some more special items." She said with haste, "What else is needed?" "The Exquisite Valley will get them for you." Li Qiye shook his head. "They aren't things you lot can obtain. I have to do it in person." She realized something and asked, "Does the Heavenvine Citadel have them?" "Yes, a very important item, the key to replenishing the peacock tree." He replied with a smile. She said, "I think the Citadel won't give it up so willingly. How could a tree father's lineage give away their treasure to an outsider, and a human at that? I have always gotten what I wanted." Li Qiye smirked. Such domineering words left her slack-jawed. She eventually said, "Young noble, you want to rob them?" Chapter 1174. Ongoing Plan, Rob. Li Qiye chortled and said, "Whether by force or as a gift, it is entirely up to them. This is their own good fortune. If they miss the chance, I can only say that they will feel very regretful later on." Kong Qinru lamented the upcoming event, forcing a tree father's lineage into giving him something. Outside of immortal emperors, no one would dare to carry out this domineering task. The ancestral vine from the citadel is still there. She had to remind him. Rumor has it that it is still very young and powerful, plenty capable of fighting an immortal emperor. After tree fathers turn into ancestral trees, these existences wouldn't care for mundane matters and weren't much different from ordinary plants. However, when an enemy invades their lineage or when a calamity approaches, these non-sentient beings would still fight to kill the enemies and protect their descendants. The young trees were especially powerful, no less than their peak from when they were still alive. Thus, not even immortal emperors could defeat them with certainty. I know. Li Qie chuckled. It's no big deal if that tree is still there. If I wasn't certain, I wouldn't be going to the citadel in the first place. She heaved a sigh of relief after hearing this. Even though she knew that Li Qie was not a bullyable nice guy, she still didn't know the true source of his power. After all, he would be facing a tree father's lineage, an invincible ancestral tree. Not too many would come out unscathed from a battle against such foes. Neither god kings nor emperor candidates would do so without being at the emperor-assailant level. Is there no other way? Maybe we can try negotiating with them. My exquisite valley still has some influence. Perhaps we can exchange some treasures with them. No matter from which angle she looked at it, she didn't want him to quarrel with the citadel. In her mind, even if he couldn't replenish the peacock tree's life, he still had an imperial bloodline. She hoped that he would be able to pass down and multiply this legacy. Your valley has a lot of treasures, but even if you take out the best ones hidden in your sect for exchange, they still won't agree. Li Qie smiled and shook his head. Kong Qinru was startled and blurted. Don't tell me that you want that item from the citadel. Yes, precisely. He nodded before she could finish speaking. It won't be easy for the peacock tree to survive for another 8 to 10 generations, so that item will be very useful. She was dumbfounded right away. Initially, she thought that he wanted something else from the citadel, not their mythical item. While looking quite silly, she had to spill her mind. Well, it will be impossible. The citadel will definitely not give it to you. Don't worry, they will. He smiled and shook his head after noticing her expression. Don't think of me as an unreasonable brute. Sometimes, I am very reasonable. I might need someone else's stuff, but I will give them something of equivalent value. Look, I'm giving them a huge chance right now. It is up to them to take it. It's still impossible. They will want nothing in exchange for it. She shook her head. It is too precious to them. That's a pity because if that's the case, the Heavenvine Citadel will collapse into ashes. He faintly smiled. What? She was stunned once more. No one would believe the upcoming destruction of the Heavenvine Citadel. Their ancestral vine was in its prime and would live for a long time across the generations. Furthermore, with its protection, who would dare to attack the citadel? Don't let your imagination run wild. It won't be destroyed right away and I won't be the one to do it. Li Qie gently shook his head. I can only say that if they give up this God-sent opportunity, they will cease to exist in 1 or 2 generations. She didn't know what to say. This matter was beyond her comprehension and imagination. He glanced over and said, outside of some other things, there is one more matter that you need to do. Go spread a message that the peacock tree is about to die. Remember, do not leave any traces. That the peacock tree is dying? She tried to confirm. Do you want to spread this message right now? No, wait until the time is right. I will let you know when. He insipidly stated. But you must be ready before then. I want this news to spread very quickly across the entire heaven spirit world. I understand, the valley will do our best. She nodded. One more thing. He ordered, make plans to temporarily evacuate everyone from the Peacock Land. I will let you know when the time is right. Evacuate. Despite being a bit startled, she still agreed. Leave this to our valley as well. Li Qie asked, and how are you doing on my issue? She quickly replied, I have just received a new message. The person you are looking for has been seen before. She was seen at the Jade Sea, to be exact, at Cavalry Town. Li Qie gently sighed and finished her sentence. Who understood the Su clan's secret channel better than him? He naturally knew where she landed after coming to the Heaven Spirit World. Yes, her first appearance was at Cavalry Town. She traveled through several places since then, It seems like she was asking about an ancient tribe. She elaborated, but later on, she crossed the sea to the Dragon Demon Sea. It gets more complicated there and we haven't received anything back. It might require more time. Li Qie nodded and said, keep on searching and update me when possible. Let Tang Jiwen in, it is about time for me to leave as well. Kong Qinru acknowledged and followed his instructions. Of course, she couldn't see Tang Jiwen herself. She took Li Qie from Golden Isle, so if others were to find out that she was the mastermind behind this, it would bring a lot of trouble to the Exquisite Valley. A moment later, Tang Jiwen marched inside and bowed the moment he saw Li Qie. Sir, this little brother will be bothering you again. Li Qie glanced at him and eventually smiled. You are not bad at all. Tang Jiwen was surprised to hear this. He didn't know why Li Qie would suddenly make this statement. Nevertheless, he still bowed and said, thank you for the kind words, sir. This little brother, no, this student came this time to ask you to come visit my Heaven Vine Citadel. The youth coughed and replied, there is indeed a problem with our ancestral vine, so I'm inviting you to personally come and perform your skillful healing arts, sir. Li Qie nonchalantly responded, if I can't cure your ancestral vine, no one else in the world can. However you, or rather, your citadel should be ready. My price will be sky high, don't blame me for not bringing this up at that point. Tang Jiwen felt that he and the citadel were fishes on a platter. Li Qie was free to do whatever he wanted to them. He took a deep breath and solemnly said, sir, rest assured that everything is negotiable as long as you can cure our ancestral vine. Li Qie looked at the boy and smirked because the boy didn't know what he wanted at all. Li Qie then spoke. It is good that you all have such determination. Let us go then, my time is very precious. Tang Jiwen didn't waste words and immediately led the way. The Heaven Vine Citadel was a great lineage in the Jade Sea. It was built on top of the Heaven Vine Ancestor, also known as the Heaven Vine Tree Father. Of course, it was not comparable to Golden Isle. The isle had 2 ancestral trees and was much older than the citadel with inconceivable resources. Nevertheless, the citadel was still a great lineage even when placed among the rest of the heaven spirit world since it still had a tree father. Not to mention ordinary cultivators, even god kings wouldn't dare to have any ideas against a place protected by an ancestral tree. However, little did the citadel know that Li Qie was preying on them. Moreover, the item he wanted was their lifeblood. Tang Jiwen and Li Qie traveled through a portal to directly reach the Heaven Vine Citadel. While standing here, anyone could feel a majestic aura full of life wafting in the air. On the platform, Li Qie glanced at the lofty sky and boundless sea. Chapter 1175. Heaven Vine Citadel. It was more apt to describe the Heaven Vine Citadel as a world suspended in the sky rather than a city. If one were sailing on the Grand Sea and looking forward, this would seem like a gigantic monster, an unimaginably large tree growing on the water. In fact, this was not a tree but a gigantic vine of an unreal magnitude since it reached even the sky canopy. One could see islands scattered about right below this great vine. Outside of little islets that were actually made from soil, there were also islands made out of the intertwining of vines. When squatting down for a different perspective, people could actually see more astonishing islands. They were being held up by the roots and even the leaves of the vine tree. Such islands were mountains taken from under the sea and placed on top of the vine tree. While standing below the vine and looking up, the entire sky would be blotted out by its branches and leaves. In fact, in this sea region, countless vine roots were criss-crossing each other. Some surfaced on the sea and looked like mountain ranges. At the same time, the sheer size of the vine tree gave the feeling that the sky above was an entirely separate world. Its parts intertwined to form a new world. Palaces were built on them and even smaller cities could be found. The old ancestors worked hard to bring many mountains up the vine tree to form landmasses and cities. In the deepest recesses of the vine tree were numerous peaks brought together into a huge continent. It was refined into a forbidden location. This was the heavenly grotto meant for the ancestors. Such a magical scene appeared before everyone, causing them to be overwhelmed with awe. An entire world was held up by this vine tree. Prosperity and downfall both brought about by the heavenly vine. Li Qie commented as he gazed at the scenery. Such words shook Tang Jiwen's mind as an ominous feeling arose. He wasn't clear of what this omen meant. Sir, this way please. He calmed down and quickly told Li Qie. Our disciples have prepared your quarters. Please rest well. It has been a long and hard journey. At the Heaven Spirit World, many ancestral trees have already fallen with their lineages following them soon afterward. Tang Jiwen couldn't come up with a retort right away, for his mind was quite confused. These ancestors would scold him if they were to hear such words. Even though he was unwilling to think about it, Li Chia was right about this fact. That day would come. However, it was very far away to him. He would definitely not live to see it. Li Chia turned and walked inside at this time. Tang Jiwen regained his composure and quickly followed behind him. There was already an old man waiting in the room. He was a little bit different. Although his body was made from flesh and blood, his right arm still carried the characteristics of a tree ant, for it seemed to be carved out of wood. Profound tree hand. Li Chia took a glimpse at the man's right hand and smiled. To have such a level of atavism, you must be the Heaven Vine Citadel Lord. The old man was surprised to see Li Chia blurt out his background so quickly. Anyone could see that his right hand was atavistic. However, few could see through its mysteries. And yet, an outsider was able to discern it with a single glance. His surprise was well warranted. Tang Jiwen was scared by Li Chia as well. He eventually made introductions after calming down. Sir, this is my master and also the current lord of our citadel. Despite being the citadel lord, the old man was very respectful and polite towards Li Chia. He bowed and said, "You must be the supreme alchemist that my disciple has been harping about." Chapter 1176. Heavenvine Citadel Lord. Li Chia glanced at both of them and smiled. It is indeed not easy to be in a great lineage. Citadel Lord, you have just won a great opportunity for the city. The two were slightly confused at Li Chia's words. They didn't know that their attitude and posture had just garnered great benefits for their city. It could be said that countless lives were saved because of them. I heard my disciple say that you are the current shining beacon who is willing to use your great skill to rid our city of worries. Though the Citadel Lord was a bit puzzled at this moment, he didn't lose his respectful attitude and bowed once more. Regardless of the time and place, powerful alchemists all enjoyed great statuses. This was doubly true for alchemists who were capable of life replenishment. A single word could command experts all over the world. Li Chia flatly stated, "I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't want to cure your ancestral vine of its calamity." The Citadel Lord's mind was moved after hearing this. If Li Chia could actually do so, this would be the greatest of news for both the Citadel and him. He took a deep breath and replied, "My disciple has told me that you are also replenishing the life of the peacock tree." Li Chia waved his hand to interrupt him. "Citadel Lord, I know what you are thinking. You want to know if I will be successful or not." He looked at the Lord and insipidly continued, "I can tell you that it is not yet done. Life replenishment can't be completed in a day or two, so there is no need to hide it. However, since I have come here, I am confident about curing your ancestral vine. It is time for you to cast aside your doubts so that you can answer one question. Will your citadel be able to pay this price? I can guarantee that I will be able to fully cure your tree, but my asking price is exorbitant." Li Chia uttered clearly, "This depends on if you are willing to pay or not." The Citadel Lord stood up to bow once more. "I was being presumptuous. Sir, if you have such capabilities, then nothing could be better. Just name the price, our citadel will not disappoint you." Li Chia interrupted him once more while shaking his head. "Citadel Lord, do not be so quick to accept, give it a moment. Should you still decline when the time comes, don't blame me for not giving you an easy way out." The Lord's heart trembled a bit, but he was already prepared. He solemnly replied, "Sir, just tell us what you want." In fact, before meeting Li Chia, the Citadel Lord had already arranged for everything. When Tang Jiwen reported this to the ancestors, they had discussed this matter in detail. If someone could actually cure the ancestral vine, the Citadel would do its best to accommodate that person. The truth was that the upper echelons were prepared for this as well. After all, they had assessed the potential cost earlier. An item desired by a supreme alchemist would, of course, be invaluable. Naturally, they were also quite confident. After several generations of accumulating wealth, they could take out any treasure or great medicine. Regardless of what this alchemist wanted, they would still be able to afford the price. Well, in a sense, what I want is not that difficult for your Heavenvine Citadel to provide. He leisurely smiled and said, "I'm not asking for much. To cure your ancestral vine, only your Heavenvine calabash will be enough." The Heavenvine calabash. Even Tang Jiwen blurted after hearing the request. The Citadel Lord became silly. He stared at Li Qie and stammered. Sir. You really want the Heaven Vine calabash? Li Qie flatly confirmed. That's right, as long as you can give me the calabash, I will fully cure your ancestral vine. Very quickly, both the Citadel Lord and Tang Jiwen became slack-jawed. The calabash was too important to the Citadel. In their minds, even if they had imperial weapons, the calabash was still worth much more. Sir, I'm afraid this isn't possible. The Lord calmed down and shook his head. Such a request was out of the question for both him and the Citadel as a whole. It seems like, in your mind, the ancestral vine isn't worth as much as a single Heaven Vine calabash. Li Qie laughed and said, This is truly disappointing. It looks like your tree father's lineage only has a bunch of short-sighted old geezers. The Citadel Lord proceeded with some helplessness. Sir, you must know that the calabash is unique. Our ancestral vine produced just one. We'll lose too much without the calabash. Li Qie waved his hand and interrupted him dismissively. I know the usage of the calabash. To keep it simple, those old geezers rely on it to prolong their lives. The undying ones buried underground, that is. All in all, they are not willing to die and want to live longer by using the calabash. The Lord was put in a difficult situation. He coughed and said, Sir, it is good that you know the usage of the calabash. The truth is that your demand is too much. Could you consider asking for something else? If you want, we have 2 9-transformation soul grasses, or we can give some divine weapons, ancient scrolls from the human race, or even immortal dewdrops from a heavenly tree. Li Qie stopped him short once more. Citadel Lord, I don't care for such things, only the Heaven Vine calabash will suffice. Li Qie's firm attitude halted the conversation. The Citadel Lord had no response because too many ancestors required the calabash for their own lifespan. The Citadel simply couldn't hand it over. Sir, can you reconsider? The Lord was quite helpless as he tried to persuade Li Qie. Li Qie looked at him and smiled. In your mind, is this calabash really more precious than the ancestral vine? Of course not. The Lord denied right away with an awkward chuckle. I know very well that all of you want to maintain an optimistic outlook. In your minds, the ancestral vine's issue can wait a bit. If it can't be dealt with right now, then you'll wait until the next generation. In short, your tree is still young and can live for a long time. But have you ever thought of the day your ancestral vine actually falls? Li Qie coldly looked at the Lord. Once your tree father falls, what will be left of the Heaven Vine Citadel? Your numerous mountains and countless palaces are all built on the vine tree. The day of your ancestral vine's destruction will be the day your citadel falls into ruin. How many of your islands are actually supported by the earth and sea? Only around 10 or 20% at best. Compared to Golden Isle, your citadel is only a pavilion in the air. They have thousands and thousands of islands that are supported by the earth and rooted in the oceans to gain great stability. What about you lot? He snorted at this point. Well, the Citadel Lord had to admit. We are indeed not as great as Golden Isle. Li Qie went on with his criticism. Your citadel wants to believe in luck. Because your ancestral vine is still in its prime, you think that as long as you leave behind enough ancestors and train a new tree father out of them. With this plan in mind, there will be no need to do more since your pillar is still there, and there is ample time. All of your resources are being poured elsewhere. He said with a laugh. Even if this generation cannot deal with it, the next might be able to, or the one after that. Even though the Citadel Lord knew that Li Qie was ridiculing them, he was not in a position to fight back and could only smile wryly. Our citadel has been looking for an alchemist to cure our ancestral vine. Yes, you all are still searching because death is not in the corners of your eyes just yet. Thus, you are not in a rush at all. Li Qie grinned. The Citadel Lord had nothing to say. Li Qie was correct in his analysis of their current plan and beliefs. They were taking their time to find a suitable alchemist to treat their ancestral vine's calamity. Chapter 1177, Ancestral Vine's Calamity. Li Qie sneered at the Citadel Lord. Really, if your ancestral vine ever lives again one day, it would crush all of you into meat paste out of anger. It would be incredibly disappointed at how greedy its descendants are. Back then, in order to bear another calabash, you all tried to seize the essence of the heaven's will, but none of you expected the punishment from the heavens that left behind an eternal calamity on your ancestral vine. How did you know? The Citadel Lord was feeling quite ashamed, but he became shocked after hearing this. This was a great secret. Outside of the Citadel Lords across the generations, even very few ancestors knew about it. Tang Jiwen was stunned as well since he didn't know about this matter. As one of the descendants, he only knew that the ancestral vine was in trouble and needed an invincible alchemist. He didn't know that this illness was caused by their ancestors in the first place. This is no secret at all. Even if your citadel has been quite deliberate in your attempt to conceal it, you still can't hide from me. Li Qie smiled. Back when immortal Emperor Busi collapsed and the heavens will return to the void, your group of ancestors became greedy and wanted to seize its essence to produce another calabash so that they could live on via life replenishment. Alas, it was a complete disaster and the heavens answered with a punishment. If your ancestral vine wasn't extremely powerful back then due to being young, your heaven vine citadel would have been rendered to ashes right then and there. Lastly, the people who are truly capable wouldn't resort to such trickery. He eventually said, "Sir, even if I trust you, the ancestors won't." "That is your business. As the descendant, you can go do something about it. The fate of the Heaven Vine Citadel is up to you and those old geezers." "I'll try," he said weakly, "but I'm not sure whether I can convince them." At this moment, he believed Li Qie more. The person didn't need to trick them. Moreover, curing the ancestral vine was much better than losing a single Heaven Vine calabash. Eventually, he bowed and left. The Citadel Lord immediately met several ancestors upon his return. After hearing the claim, the group immediately went to check the seal of the calamity. The seal remained completely untouched. Nevertheless, for prudence's sake, the Citadel Lord still convened a meeting and invited several more ancestors. Many old ancestors disagreed with Li Qie's claim and thought that he was simply trying to scare them for the calabash. However, the Citadel Lord still carried out this meeting solemnly. He personally met Li Qie, and though he still had a lot of questions, his conversation with Li Qie left him feeling that the probability of Li Qie lying was quite low. After all, this was their territory. Li Qie shouldn't even think about leaving if he was trying to trick them. On the other hand, those strong enough to leave their citadel forcefully would look down on such trickery. After the meeting, many ancestors opposed Li Qie's argument. They thought that even if he wasn't trying to trick them, it was still exaggerated. The Citadel Lord's idea was to ask Li Qie to treat the ancestral vine. In his mind, regardless of how long the vine had left to live, it indeed was trapped by a calamity that they had always wanted to eradicate. Chapter 1178. Negotiation. Meanwhile, the Hao branch strongly opposed the Citadel Lord's proposal. They were quite adamant in this regard. The Hao branch was a powerful family in the Heaven Vine Citadel. They had an ancient and powerful bloodline, especially their main disciple, Hao Yuzhen. Hao Yuzhen had an old regal bloodline. Both their background and bloodline were extremely noble. The reason was very simple. Hao Yuzhen and Tang Jiwen were evenly matched and both were competing for the seat of the Citadel Lord. At the same time, the current Citadel Lord and Tang Jiwen were from a different branch. Though this competition between the two branches had yet to escalate to a life-and-death conflict, it had never ceased. In particular, the rivalry between Hao Yuzhen and Tang Jiwen was quite fierce. The old regal bloodline of Hao Yuzhen made their cultivation quite strong. On the other hand, Tang Jiwen had his wooden eyes, so he was equally powerful. Both of them had the potential to become the new lord. Thus, the Hao branch naturally wouldn't agree with this matter. If Li Qie could actually cure the ancestral vine, this would be a great merit for Tang Jiwen. He is only a charlatan of unknown origin. Why should we trust his words? An ancestor from the Hao branch was certain that Li Qie was here for the calabash. If our ancestral vine's calamity was really as grave as he says, we would have felt it already. Even our forefathers don't seem to think so. The calamity is clearly sealed. He is just trying to get attention. Many ancestors outside of the Hao branch agreed as well. After all, there were no negative signs coming from their ancestral vine. If it was on the verge of collapse, the citadel would have felt it by now. There should at least be some ominous signs, but none could be found. This was indicative of the vine's current status. Moreover, their seal was completely untouched as well. "I don't think so." The Citadel Lord went against the crowd. If Mr. Li was a liar, he should know that there would be no place for him to stay at the Heaven Spirit World after tricking us. However, if he is confident enough in his own strength to deal with us, then does he need to lie in the first place? With that, he glanced at each ancestor and said, "Moreover, he knows more than even our imagination, secrets unknown to outsiders. How could a mere charlatan be privy to these things?" The How ancestor coldly retorted, "Some things will be found out if people try hard enough to learn about them. Plus, who dares to say with certainty that no one else has leaked the secret?" The Lord ignored him and focused on the other ancestors instead. "Let us take a step back and assume that Mr. Li is simply exaggerating. Our ancestral vine was indeed inflicted by this calamity. Because of this, we have been trying to find treatments from one generation to another, yet we still haven't found an alchemist capable of doing so. But now, Mr. Li is confident in his ability to cure our ancestral vine. This is a once-in-myriad generations opportunity for us." The ancestors here found themselves in a dilemma. If Li Qiye were to actually cure the ancestral vine, it meant that they must pay a great price. Not everyone was willing to do so. On this matter, I will have to consult some of the older ancestors. The oldest ancestor here made his decision. The Citadel Lord and the younger ancestors could only agree. They would make a final call after the ancient ancestors have made up their minds. Regardless of whether they would employ his services, the great hospitality did not go away. Li Qiye was still treated as an esteemed guest. He stared at the vast sea above his room on top of the giant leaf. His eyes then focused on the distant horizon. The truth was that he didn't care for the ancestors' decision. Regardless of the method, he must obtain the Heaven Vine calabash with or without their consent. A sweet breeze blew by. A woman suddenly floated closer and stood by his side. She was very beautiful and emitted a fresh aura like a pearl placed on top of a green leaf. She looked at him and asked, "Are you the alchemist invited by Senior Brother Tang?" He looked at her and faintly smiled. "Yes, that's me," she said. "I am a Heaven Vine disciple. Senior Brother Ting asked me to come here to tell you to leave right away." Li Qiye laughed in response. "Leave? Why should I have to leave?" "Sir, you might be unaware of this, but the situation is quite unfavorable for you," she explained. "The ancestors think that you want to steal our calabash, so they want to imprison you." Li Qiye burst out in laughter before she could finish, as if he had just heard the funniest thing in his life. "Why do you laugh?" She didn't understand. Li Qiye observed her for a bit before leisurely replying, "An ancient regal bloodline flows within you. At the Heaven Vine City, only the Hao branch has this old Treant bloodline. There are two main branches, Hao and Ting. For millions of years, the Citadel Lord would sometimes be someone with a different last name, but the majority of the time this position would be taken by one of these two branches." Li Qiye smiled and looked at the girl. "Tang Jiwen has wooden pupils, so he is qualified to be the Citadel Lord. Your regal bloodline can keep up with him, but barely. When his wooden pupils reach the peak, it can sentence one's life and death." The girl was startled and had to stagger back after hearing this. She stared at Li Qiye as if he was a ghost. Not even in her dreams would she expect for this seemingly insignificant person to reveal her identity. "You're only a junior, yet you still dare to scheme before me? You don't know your own limits." Li Qiye lazily sneered. "You just want to scare me away before telling everyone that I have escaped from being found out. Then you would put the blame on Tang Jiwen in order to smear him. This little trick is not enough to get into my sight." The girl's complexion turned white then green in a short period of time. Her tricks were exposed in such a humiliating manner. Chapter 1179. How Yuzhen. This girl was How Yuzhen, Tang Jiwen's strongest rival for the Citadel Lord's position. She had an ancient regal bloodline that qualified her for the position. She coldly sneered. "It seems like Senior Brother Tang is quite close to you to actually tell you so many things. You better be careful. Revealing the secret of the Citadel is a capital offense." At this time, she had other plans to splash some dirty water on Tang Jiwen. Although many geniuses put on an air of humility, they are still very arrogant inside. "This makes you better than many people. Sir, I suppose I should be honored by your praise." At this time, the youth was clearly showing his hostility. Li Qiye smiled. "I can understand your emotions right now. You're right, I simply wanted the calabash from the beginning. It is very important in the process of life replenishment for the peacock tree. Very few things can replace it." The boy murmured, "I knew it." He had his suspicions earlier, but now Li Qiye had confirmed it with his own mouth. "You can think of it as you having led a wolf into your home," Li Qiye said. But I don't agree with that notion. Tang Jiwen coldly countered. Sir, you have been scheming against us from the start, so how are you not a wolf? Li Qie laughed in response. Will your citadel not pay me after I cure your ancestral vine? Will you not hand the calabash over? Regardless of the process, I will get the calabash in the end. So is it a crime to be aiming for your calabash in the first place? If I didn't want it, do you think I would be sitting here wasting my time? That's different. He had maintained a strong front despite finding things difficult. Sir, you are simply forcing us. Li Qie casually replied. I am, but what is more important, the ancestral vine or the calabash? Without the vine you will have nothing. Your citadel will be nothing. The boy's face turned white. He didn't know what to say at this moment. In the end, he stared at Li Qie and asked. So you are saying you are 100% confident in curing our vine? Li Qie lazily answered. Do you think the peacock tree's condition is more serious, or your ancestral vines? If I can renew that tree's life, how can I not be capable of curing your ancestral vine? Chapter 1180. Fairness. After internally deliberating his next question, Tang Jiwen asked Li Qie. If the citadel doesn't hand the calabash over in 2 days, will you take it by force? Correct. Li Qie chuckled. 2 days is all you have before you must hand it over. You. He didn't know whether to be scared or angry. Li Qie was being quite blunt with his intentions. Li Qie raised his teacup again and took an elegant sip. There's no need to be angry. Trust me, even though I am a fierce person that is unreasonable at times, I won't take your calabash for free. I will cure your ancestral tree, a quid pro quo. Tang Jiwen had been finding it difficult to choose his words when talking to Li Qie. It was just as the man said, even if he took the calabash by force, as long as he were to cure the ancestral vine the ultimate outcome would still be the same. The only thing different would be the process. But you should ready yourself. Li Qie drank another mouthful and smiled. I am not a nice guy. I won't show any mercy to those who try to stop me, and you are no exception. A light flashed across his eyes as he uttered these words. Tang Jiwen felt a cold chill after seeing the glint, as if something sharp had pricked his heart. At the same time, he felt death looming over him. He took a deep breath and said, The Heaven Vine Citadel isn't a place where people can come and go as they please. Not even a god king could tread freely within our walls, let alone become our enemy. His statement was not a threat. He was simply telling the truth. The citadel was powerful enough to the point where no one could look down on it. Moreover, who would dare to do anything foolish while the ancestral vine was protecting it? You underestimate me too much. Li Qie laughed and shook his head. You still don't know who you are facing or the gravity behind your citadel's choice. Do you think I am scared of the citadel after choosing to come here all by myself? Do you think I even place it in my sight? Such words left Tang Jiwen breathless. They were arrogant and aggressive to the point of being humiliatingly offensive. Someone was blustering and viewing his citadel with such contempt. As its descendant, even though he was very well-mannered, a blazing fury still burned in his heart. Even a mud Buddha would become angry at times. Sir, your words are too outrageous. In the entire heaven spirit world, not too many people would dare to say them in front of me. He took a deep breath and glared at Li Qie while lowering his voice. Look me in the eye. Li Qie retorted. Do you see the Heaven Vine Citadel in there? Tang Jiwen shivered and subconsciously stared straight into Li Qie's eyes. He immediately felt something with just a glimpse and took several thumping steps backward with a shocked expression. What he saw was bloodthirst, a bloodthirst that blotted out the sun, one that would slay any god that attempted to block its path. This direct and naked bloodthirst couldn't be faked. A wanton will to murder was the most terrifying emotion. It was a force that instilled an instinctive fear in others. Thus it was also the most authentic sensation. Tang Jiwen was frightened by this murderous aura. At this second, he understood that Li Qie truly wasn't lying to him and that he would really kill anyone that stood in his way. Regardless of where his confidence stemmed from, he knew that Li Qie really didn't care for the Heaven Vine Citadel. He would truly start a massacre in this place. He stared at Li Qie with awe and anger. At this time, he was full of regret for bringing a wolf into his own home. An unlucky star to the citadel. Li Qie withdrew his gaze and blinked before setting the teacup down again. There's no need to feel regret or anger. You did not bring an enemy to the citadel. The dazed youth asked. What do you mean? Li Qie smiled and said, "Think about it, even if you didn't bring me here, how would that stop me from wanting the calabash? I need it in order to heal the peacock tree, so whether you led me here or not doesn't matter at all." Nevertheless, Tang Jiwen still felt guilty because it was him who took Li Qie here. Li Qie began, "Instead of standing there hating me or feeling regretful, why not seize the opportunity?" He looked at Li Qie and asked, "What opportunity?" "A chance to maintain the peace of your citadel." Li Qie lightly said, "Me telling you to bring me here was to give you and the citadel a chance for peace. Complete the trade willingly and there will be no need for killing, for blood to stain these walls. This is a transaction beneficial to both sides. Take this chance and I won't have to bother cutting people's heads off one by one, and your citadel won't have to lose too many people." Finally, everyone would happily end this deal with a smile on their faces. Li Qie glanced at the youth after saying this. The boy blurted out, "But you are just forcing us. How is this a deal? Do we actually have a say in this matter?" Li Qie interrupted him with a wave of his sleeve. "What you are choosing between is the trade or the collapse of the ancestral vine and your citadel turning into ashes. To be frank right now, your citadel only consists of a bunch of idiots." Having said that, his glare turned cold. "A group of greedy fools that only want everything without paying the price. Your ancestral vine's calamity has lasted for how many years? Yet you all have failed to eradicate it. Were you willing to pay a fortune to look for an alchemist in the 9 worlds? The answer is no, the effort has never been there. This so-called search for an alchemist was only a little sham. To be even harsher, the descendants of the Heaven Vine Citadel are a bunch of parasites latching onto the vine itself. You're all only worrying about your own desires instead of thinking about the ancestral vine. Meanwhile, those undying geezers struggling to live till now, are they actually thinking about trading away the calabash? No, they simply don't want to die. In their eyes, their dog lives are more important than the calamity that is tormenting their ancestral vine." He sneered with disdain. "If you weren't the Tree Father's descendants, I'm sure it would have trampled all of you to death, a bunch of vermins and parasites." He was particularly harsh this time. This denunciation left Tang Jiwen's complexion red and white. At this moment, he had even forgotten to refute. We still have plenty of time," he replied weakly. In fact, he didn't know if this was true or not. If Li Qie was speaking the truth, then they didn't have that much time left. "Plenty of time?" Li Qie laughed. "How many times do you think those geezers have repeated this phrase? Ever since the end of immortal Emperor Bu Si, how many generations have passed? Your ancestors only know how to spew this worthless drivel and have never proven it with any actions. Just a bunch of trash." Li Qie sneered in disdain and said, "Go repeat every single word I have said to them. Let them know that they are all talk, a bunch of useless parasites. So what if they are strong? Using the calabash to prolong their own lives without doing shit. There is nothing more useless than them." Tang Jiwen was quite stimulated by this blatant disdain. He wanted to retort, but no words came out of his gaping mouth. He felt completely powerless to refute Li Qie. "If I didn't want the calabash to save the peacock tree, I wouldn't bother coming here. Your ancestral vine's fate has nothing to do with me. To be frank, if I didn't have to save the peacock tree, even if your ancestors prostrated before me while handing over the calabash to save your ancestral vine, I wouldn't care about your citadel's bullshit." Li Qie coldly stared at the youth. Tang Jiwen stood there for a moment, speechless. At this minute, he felt his voice waning away. This was because Li Qie's words had penetrated his innermost thoughts. He was right, the citadel had never cared for or tried to save the ancestral vine. Chapter 1181. Tang Jiwen's ability. Li Qie's criticism deeply stabbed into Tang Jiwen's deepest fear. It was mercilessly striking at the scar of their Heaven Vine Citadel. "We are not trash, parasites, or vermin to the ancestral vine." In the end, he could only utter this sentence. Li Qie dismissively glanced at him. "In my eyes, there is not much of a difference. What are you all if not that? Your old geezers are all talk. Prove it, then, by acting as real descendants for the ancestral vine to see." Tang Jiwen took a deep breath and bowed to say, "Sir, keep waiting. The citadel will give you an answer within 2 days." He turned and left, determination evident in his firm steps. Li Qie smiled and closed his eyes for a moment of repose without a care. In his mind, It didn't matter if the boy was going to ask for reinforcements or to persuade the ancestors. When the time was up, he would take away the calabash and do what must be done. After Tang Jiwen left, the island became quiet. No disciples came to capture Li Qia. It seemed like the youth didn't go tell the ancestors to capture him. On the evening of the second day, Tang Jiwen came back in a hurry with a gaunt demeanor, but his eyes were bright and full of vitality. He took a deep breath and told Li Qia, "Sir, our ancestors have agreed to the deal. As long as you can cure our ancestral vine, the calabash will be yours." Li Qia looked at the boy and smirked before speaking. "It seems like I must re-evaluate you. I'm sure it wasn't easy to convince those geezers from your citadel. This requires great determination. This is all to the credit of Master's group." Tang Jiwen sighed without any signs of complacency. "I have only done what any disciple of the citadel should do." "Very good. If the citadel comes under your leadership in the future, it will certainly be prosperous." Li Qia nodded. The youth remained humble even after being praised. He bowed and asked, "Sir, may I ask when you will begin the treatment?" "Right now," Li Qia flatly replied. "Time waits for no one. It is time to end the business here as I must go elsewhere." This startled the youth. He didn't expect Li Qia to start so soon. Keep in mind that many powerful alchemists had tried to cure this calamity to no avail. Li Qia told him, "Tell your ancestors to prepare. I will go to the forbidden area to cure your ancestral vine." The youth took a deep breath and went to carry out the command. Eventually, the citadel agreed for Li Qia to begin any time. It also opened the forbidden ground for him. Many wise sages implemented an incomparable seal on the land near the ancestral vine. Without their permission, outsiders would have difficulty moving in this area, let alone launching an attack. The citadel's response and actions were quite swift this time. Who knew what Tang Jiwen did to lobby them? To be able to do so in just 2 short days was quite impressive for a junior like him. Of course, Li Qia wouldn't care about such things. This was the citadel's business. He only cared about curing the ancestral vine and taking the heaven vine calabash. When everything was ready, Tang Jiwen and the citadel lord led Li Qia to the forbidden ground. In fact, the boy was only able to successfully persuade the ancestors because of his master's support. Otherwise, a junior like him trying to convince those ancestors would have been much harder. A couple moments later, they stood right outside of the forbidden ground. This was the most important location in the whole citadel. It had the densest amount of worldly energy. Legend states that one could enter the inner world of the ancestral vine through this forbidden ground, but no one had entered since the death of the Tree Father's son. Many disciples and ancestors were standing right outside of the forbidden ground at this moment. They were all important characters of the protector level and up. Some were supreme elders as well. The treatment of the ancestral vine was of the highest importance to the citadel. Whether it was to be vigilant against Li Qia or fear of accidents occurring during the process, in short, the citadel's powerful forces were here to cope with any unexpected circumstances. Li Qia only gave this crowd a quick glimpse. Regardless of their preparations, he didn't mind killing those who stood in his path. "Hold it!" As Li Qia was about to enter the forbidden ground, a shout rang out. Hao Yuzhen stood up. This made Tang Jiwen and the citadel lord furrow their brows. They had reached a unanimous agreement regarding this deal. They didn't want any complications that might cause the deal to turn awry. Thus they had a bad feeling as she stood up. Li Qia glanced at her and lazily asked, "What's the matter?" She put on a businesslike appearance as she coldly said, "You must hand over all of your belongings outside of the materials required for the healing process. Other items aren't allowed inside the forbidden ground." Tang Jiwen raised his voice. "Junior sister, what are you doing?" Hao Yuzhen was causing trouble on purpose. She didn't know how he managed to convince the ancient ancestors in the sect, but at this moment, his position had soared and it was a great threat to her. Therefore, she wanted to use this opportunity to stop Li Qia. Stopping Li Qia was the same as stopping Tang Jiwen. "Ancestor, we reached an agreement about this matter. So what are these sudden complications?" The citadel lord was unhappy as well and looked over at Ancestor Hao. Ancestor Hao slowly said, "The deal and agreement are still unchanged, but we must be cautious for the safety of the ancestral tree. Your alchemist is here for our treasure. Who dares say that he won't do anything shady in secret?" The citadel lord glanced over at the other older ancestors here and asked, "Ancestors, what are your thoughts? Alchemist Li can still bring items inside, But as a preventative measure, we must ask to check your items first. An old ancestor spoke with a deep tone. They were still very wary of Li Qie. After Hao Yuzhen's comment, they were indeed afraid of Li Qie doing anything to the ancestral vine. Despite being annoyed, the Citadel Lord and Tang Jiwen had no retorts. The reasoning was sound. Even though they weren't necessarily cautious of Li Qie, they still didn't want to complicate the deal. Otherwise, all of their efforts would have been in vain. Did you hear that? Let us perform a full body search. Every item of yours must be checked as well. With the approval of the older ancestors, Hao Yuzhen was emboldened. Li Qie didn't bother looking at her. He glanced over at the old ancestors from the citadel and smiled faintly while shaking his head. There are a few excellent members in this place, so I thought that there would have been changes. It seems that in the end, it is still just a bunch of inflexible old men. What a disappointment. The older ancestors were not happy to hear this disdainful comment. Meanwhile, the master and disciple pair turned bitter. This matter had taken a sudden turn for the worse. Naive fool, you dare to shame our citadel? Take this. This was a rare opportunity, so Hao Yuzhen naturally wouldn't let it go. Her palm aimed for his face. However, before this slap could reach Li Qie, her hand was suddenly gripped by him. He stared directly at her face and smiled. An idiot like you dares to scream in front of me? You don't know life from death. Crank! Crack! He crushed her slender jade-white arm before even finishing his sentence. Help! She screamed for assistance. Her reaction was too slow. Li Qie's right hand was already clutching her milky pale neck. He was way too fast. Even the ancestors here had a difficult time seeing him move. Before they knew it, he already had her raised into the air by the neck. Chapter 1182. Kill without mercy. It only took a single blink for him to crush her wrist and then grab her neck. It was too late for anyone to even try and save her. No. Both Tang Jiwen and the Citadel Lord were jolted with shocked expressions. Save me. Her face turned red due to a lack of oxygen from being choked. Junior, what are you doing? The Hao ancestor was shocked. Very quickly, the disciples from the Citadel completely surrounded Li Qie. Outside of a few ancestors from the Hao branch, many elders from the Citadel itself were present as well. Li Qie maintained his grip and coldly glared at the group before nonchalantly declaring, "Still want to play? Try and stop me and I'll crush your heads." Wait, let us talk it out first. The Citadel Lord was sweating. He quickly mediated. Sir, we can slowly discuss this again. Just let go of my niece first. Sir, we can still talk it out. Tang Jiwen was quite scared as well and hurriedly told Li Qie. There's no need to ruin the friendly atmosphere. It was only a misunderstanding. Li Qie lazily declared. There's nothing to talk about. Either scram to the side and don't bother me or I'll cut all of your heads off. In just a moment, everyone's expressions turned quite ugly. This was no longer about the internal competition. Li Qie's blatant contempt had humiliated and antagonized the entire citadel. There is nothing to discuss now. The Hao ancestor coldly said. Let go of Yuzhen right now and surrender before you risk your own life. With just you all? Li Qie dismissively responded. Only a bunch of nobodies, not enough to even be an appetizer. The Citadel Lord was speechless. He couldn't mediate anymore, so he said with a bitter expression. My little ancestor, just let go of her and I can guarantee your safety. Tang Jiwen had no words to say. The deal was supposed to be smooth. But look at things now. Just one word of discord could cause blood to splatter every 3 steps. At this time, all the experts and ancestors of the Citadel were glaring at Li Qie. He was completely provoking their city's prestige and authority. If they didn't teach this ignorant person a lesson, people would think that their city was easy to bully. Junior, you are being too arrogant. Let go of Yuzhen or we'll end your dog life. Even those who weren't part of the Hao branch were shouting, unable to contain their anger. If it wasn't for her being a hostage, they would have pounced forward and cut him into countless pieces already. Li, listen. Even a god king would die if they come to our citadel. With so many ancestors backing her up, Hao Yuzhen became more courageous despite being in his clutches. She struggled to breathe before shouting. Just let me go. Break your own arms and legs and end your cultivation. Then we'll spare your crack. It was a familiar scene. Before she could finish, he had crushed her neck. She didn't even have the chance to scream since death came too quickly. Everyone became dumbfounded. In the middle of the encirclement, he still dared to kill his only hostage. This was the same as cutting off his only path of retreat. No sane person in this predicament would kill their only hostage. This truly stunned all the experts and even the Hao ancestor. No. Ting Jiwen was completely frightened. He spent painstaking efforts to convince the ancestors to agree to this deal. But now, everything had turned into smoke. Incomparably foolish. Threatening to break my arms and legs as well as my cultivation under the situation. Li Qie didn't even bat an eye. He threw her body to the side like trash. Little animal, I'm going to grind your bones to dust. The Hao ancestor's roar echoed to the clouds. He unleashed a palm capable of chopping tides and splitting the ocean. Bang! Li Qie remained undaunted. With a tyrannical pose, he unleashed a direct punch, a fist that could shatter the past. It was a quiet fist that didn't create gales or display an overbearing momentum. One could hear something fracturing. The Hao ancestor's arm shattered after receiving this fist. He had to take several steps back while spewing out blood. This shocked everyone present, forcing them to take deep breaths to calm down. The Hao ancestor was still a grand character at the citadel, but he wasn't a match for Li Qie. The ancestors became cautious right away. They took out their weapons and began to circle him. The other experts instantly left the battlefield to give room to their ancestors. This level of battle was not something the juniors could participate in. They would only get in the way. The Heavenvine's Citadel Lord was completely stupefied. He thought that the ordinary-looking Li Qie was just an alchemist. He didn't expect him to be heaven-defyingly powerful. Tang Jiwen couldn't speak at all. This had escalated out of his control. It was up to the ancestors to decide now. He had wondered how powerful Li Qie was, but this remained a mystery until now. He finally got a general concept of how strong the guy was. Zzz. A buzz resounded as the shattered arm of the Hao ancestor quickly recovered. However, he was in a frenzy. Being seriously injured by a junior was truly a disgrace in his eyes. With a twisted expression, he took out his true weapon and coldly said, "Little animal, if our Heavenvine Citadel doesn't peel your skin, sever your tendons, and drink your blood, we won't need to stay in the Heaven Spirit World any longer." Another ancestor yelled at him. "Junior, it is not too late to surrender." Li Qie sneered at the experts and said, "Surrender? In my eyes, all of you are mere insects. I can trample all of you to death with one stomp." "Naive fool, still blustering before death," the Hao ancestor shouted. "Brothers, what are we waiting for? Let's chop this little animal to X." Blood spattered everywhere. Before the ancestor could finish his words, a tree branch came out of nowhere and pierced his skull. His eyes dilated from confusion about his sudden death. The spectators were dumbfounded by this scene. To their surprise, a long vine was wrapped around Li Qie's arm. This vine actually grew out from their ancestral vine's body. The elders audibly gasped after seeing this sudden development. They turned pale and retreated while staring at Li Qie in disbelief. A vine growing from their ancestral tree actually killed the Hao ancestor. How could such a thing happen? In their citadel, the ancestral vine was not only their progenitor, it was also their divine guardian that had been sheltering them for generations. But today, instead of killing the enemy, it killed an ancestor from their city. If such a thing were to be spread, no one would believe it. This was already inconceivable, even when they witnessed it in person. An ancestor murmured in astonishment, "Evil art, this is definitely an evil art." This was the only explanation they could come up with. Li Qie used some strange and evil witchcraft to control the ancestral vine to kill the Hao ancestor. A frightened ancestor screamed, "He cultivates an evil art. We can't let him live any longer. Kill him at all costs. Kill!" The rest of the ancestors present all roared together and unleashed their weapons to slay Li Qie. They wouldn't mind paying any price to stop Li Qie from leaving the citadel alive. Otherwise, he would certainly become a great menace in the future. A bunch of fools. Li Qie coldly glared at them and simply flipped his palm over, not bothering to give them another glance. A large leaf that was growing from the vine tree suddenly shot out. Boom, boom, boom. The weapons attacking Li Qie all shattered before this leaf. With another loud blast, the flower swept through the ancestors like the end of autumn, sending them flying while spurting blood. Chapter 1183. Sunflower Forefather Splash. A series of splashes came about. All of the blown-away ancestors fell into the ocean. This scene was too shocking. The experts here couldn't regain their composure. Both Tang Jiwen and the Citadel Lord were slack-jawed from fear. This was simply a legendary tale. In this split second, they suddenly thought about the possibility that their ancestral tree might be controlled by Li Qie. However, that would be preposterous. Even their own ancestors couldn't control the vine, let alone an outsider. If this was indeed the case, then the only plausible explanation was that Li Qie did have a demonic art. Anyone else want to stand in my way? Vine branches from the ancestral tree began to merge behind Li Qie. The experts here were aghast, to say the least. They had never seen such a demonic art before. It was beyond their imagination. Eventually, the experts glanced at each other. They continued to slowly converge on Li Qie to the point of not even letting a single drop of water through. Naturally, they were quite afraid. Even their ancestors were blown to the horizon like flies, and they were not as strong as them. However, letting Li Qie go or retreating weren't options they could take. They deemed him too great of a threat to let him leave alive today. Li Qie smiled at these experts. A bit idiotic, but still quite unyielding. Daring to come despite knowing the disparity. Vine Controller. A loud explosion came from a cave along with a voice. Although this voice was very quiet, everyone could hear it clearly. An old man emerged from the forbidden ground. To be exact, it was a sunflower tree. It was much taller than an adult. Moreover, the sunflowers on the tree were blossoming to great sizes. There was an old man's face on the sunflower in the center. He came out of the forbidden ground without exuding any blood energy. However, he gave the feeling that a simple flip of his palm could cause the world to collapse. An ancestral form. Tang Jiwen murmured after seeing the shape of this sunflower. The ancestral form was a method of obtaining atavism for Trey ants. Many within this race would cultivate a human form and become powerful existences. However, this was not to say that a humanoid form was more powerful. In fact, it was precisely the opposite. A humanoid Trey ant was not as powerful as an ancestral form Trey ant because this atavistic form allowed them to control the strongest origin power. However, despite the great benefits, there was a fatal weakness to the ancestral form. There was no way to pass down their bloodline if they were to keep this form, regardless of how powerful and heaven-defying they might be. Eventually, their legacy would end. Only those with a flesh and blood body could reproduce and spread their bloodline to future descendants. Because of this, the majority of the Trey ants would cultivate into a human form. Very few were willing to maintain the ancestral form. After all, everyone wanted to pass down their legacy. Being strong was meaningless if it meant that one would lose the ability to reproduce and pass down their legacy. The Citadel Lord came back from his shock and murmured after seeing this sunflower. Sunflower Forefather. An expert was ecstatic and muttered. It is the forefather, our forefather has come into being. So it turned out that this large sunflower was the sunflower forefather. He was the most powerful and oldest ancestor of the Citadel. His appearance was a rare sight. Even the Citadel Lord had only seen him once in his life, and this was at a very young age. At this moment, this forefather couldn't believe it either. He stared intensely at Li Qie and the vine branches behind him while feeling that this was a dream. As the forefather came closer, the experts surrounding Li Qie all made way. In fact, they could finally breathe easy. No one would be able to oppose the forefather, not even Li Qie's demonic art, even if it was stronger. The forefather was not very confident as he asked Li Qie. Can you really manipulate it? Are you a vine controller? He glanced at the sunflower and smirked. Old man, try me and see. I'll be happy to display this majestic and invincible power. Tang Jiwen panicked after hearing Li Qie's response. For millions of years, no one had dared to be disrespectful towards the forefather. The sunflower forefather's eyes began to flash like blossoming starlight. In a split second, he whisked his arm and isolated space as if he wanted to banish Li Qie. Bang! But before the banishment could take effect, the nearby space shattered. With another bang, the forefather was pushed back into the huge vine tree. Vine branches then came together to form a hand of God that coiled around the forefather's neck. His entire body was propped up against the vine tree, instantly suppressing him. No way! The Citadel Lord and everyone else were aghast. It was not an exaggeration to say that they nearly pissed their pants in terror. Even their invincible sunflower forefather was suppressed, so how could they not pale from fear? All the experts felt despair. There was no one left to oppose Xueqi outside of their ancestral vine. In spite of this, they still mustered together to try and stop Xueqi once more. They must face him despite knowing that they were not his match. In just a moment, both Tang Jiwen and the Citadel Lord felt suffocated. In their minds, no one should be able to stop the forefather in present times, yet he was rendered motionless. This was too terrorizing. The forefather being pushed against the vine tree raised both of his hands and quickly said, "Wait, I bear no malice, it was just a test." Xueqi glanced at him. Then the branches in the form of the god hand loosened to let him go. It turned back into vine branches that hovered behind Xueqi. "You really are a vine controller." The shocked sunflower forefather couldn't believe it despite having confirmed it. He finally took a deep breath and asked while staring at Xueqi, "Is your bloodline from our citadel?" Xueqi laughed in response. "Old man, you are overthinking things. My bloodline is the purest of the human lineage. I am not a descendant of your ancestral vine, and definitely have nothing to do with your citadel." "How inconceivable!" The forefather carefully looked at Xueqi, and confirmed that he indeed didn't have even a hint of the citadel's bloodline. He continued, "Outside of the only biological son of the Tree Father, no one else has appeared in all these generations that can communicate with the Tree Father. No one aside from its son has been able to become a vine controller, yet an outsider like you can control the vines." Here, his eyes flashed with a revelation. "Could it be that the ancestral vine has chosen you to become the vine controller of our citadel? Your imagination is too much." With a grin, Xueqi waved his sleeve to interrupt the forefather. "I am not your divine guardian or a vine controller. I'm only someone who is teaching a lesson to this group of foolish descendants in the vine's stead." Xueqi naturally wasn't a so-called vine controller. He used the myriad age tree to communicate with the ancestral vine. Although the vine itself had no sentience, its instinct was still there and allowed Xueqi to use its power. The forefather said with excitement, "Regardless, you can still control everything here, so you are a vine controller. Only those with the permission of the ancestral vine would be able to use its power." "You are speaking too much nonsense, but one thing is indeed true." Xueqi smiled. "I can indeed control the power of the ancestral vine." Chapter 1184. Vine Controller. Despite Xueqi's denial of being a vine controller, the sunflower forefather was still very excited. "After so many years, we have finally waited long enough for a vine controller to appear. We shall be able to rise in this generation." "Old man, you are overthinking things." Xueqi interrupted the forefather again and spoke in a lackadaisical manner. "This vine controller thing or the citadel rising? I don't have any interest in this. I am only here to make a deal." Despite Xueqi's lack of interest, the forefather pressed on with some wishful thinking. He shouted at the experts and said, "What are you waiting for? Come and greet his venerable vine controller. His will is the will of the ancestral vine." In the mind of the forefather, this was a one and only chance of this generation. This was a vine controller. If he could keep the guy here, his ability would be absolutely priceless for their citadel. The experts here felt quite confused, but after carefully thinking things through, it made a little sense. Even though Xueqi was an outsider, he has clearly been accepted by the ancestral vine. Now, even the forefather has recognized Xueqi's identity. This meant that Xueqi had won the will of the ancestral vine. The experts came forward to bow towards Xueqi. This sudden reversal was like a dream. A few moments ago, they were trapped in a fight to the death against Xueqi, but now he had become the representative of the ancestral vine. Go back and do some personal reflection. There are things that can be done and things that shouldn't be done. In the end, the forefather yelled at the experts from the citadel before chasing them away. Eventually, the only juniors left were the Citadel Lord and Tang Jiwen. "Vine Controller, since you are already here, please stay at our citadel. There are many juniors that require your guidance." The sunflower forefather smiled brightly. Xueqi was not interested in being this so-called vine controller. He halted the forefather again. "I won't bother with this kind of laborious undertaking. My time is limited. I am only responsible for curing the ancestral vine. After taking the calabash away, I will have nothing to do with this place." The forefather couldn't find an excuse to reject his refusal. He could only smile wryly. That's fine, We'll focus on the ancestral vine then. He was someone who understood the logic that an impatient person shouldn't be eating hot tofu. It would be troublesome to push Xueqi too much. The forefather helplessly replied. No one knew that such a thing would happen back then. It was already too late once we realized it. The other jade pillar was destroyed while the heavens unleashed its scourge upon us. Xueqi coldly said, greed is one thing, but to not understand your own limits to this point. Of course the heavens would send down its punishment. If you all had an immortal emperor overseeing things, then it might have been a successful struggle. However, relying on you old bones alone? Heh, it was already very fortunate that the villainous heavens didn't render your citadel to ashes. The forefather sighed again. Several of his senior brothers died miserably during this disaster, not to mention the calamity left behind on their ancestral vine. Meanwhile, the duo quietly listened. Even though the Citadel Lord knew a lot, this was the first time he had heard about the details of the past. While looking at the jade pillar that resembled a tendon of the heavens, Xueqi ordered the Lord, go up there and break it. Break it. The Lord felt his legs suddenly become weak and thought that he had misheard. This jade pillar was extremely significant to their citadel. Smashing it was tantamount to smashing their own treasure. Break it. Even the forefather turned silly. He stared at Xueqi in disbelief and said, this is the only one left, if you break it now. Xueqi dismissively countered, break it and you will understand. The Citadel Lord glanced over at the forefather. He didn't dare to do such a thing. The forefather took a deep breath and commanded, break it. If his lordship orders it, it must be correct. The Citadel Lord took a deep breath then flew into the sky with a huge hammer in his hands. Both of his hands were trembling at this moment. With one smash, he would personally be destroying the most precious treasure in the Heavenvine Citadel. Perhaps he would even become a sinner of his sect. Chapter 1185. The missing calamity. Eventually, he took a deep breath while tightening his grip on the huge hammer. He clenched his teeth and made up his mind before ruthlessly slamming it down. Clink! With a pleasing sound, the jade pillar shattered in one hit as if it was made out of glass. Countless fragments fell down from the sky like dust. The Citadel Lord and the Sunflower Forefather both shouted, impossible! They were both aghast and lost in disbelief. The Citadel Lord looked in bewilderment at his hammer since he didn't expect to destroy the jade pillar in just one smash. He wondered if his hammer had always been this strong. What? This can't be. The seal is still here with the surviving jade pillar, but why is it completely undamaged? The Sunflower Forefather was overwhelmed with shock. As for Tang Jiwen, he stood there looking silly because he didn't know what was happening. He had never been here before, so he had no clue about this seal or the calamity. Where is the calamity? It isn't here. The forefather swept through the entire citadel with his divine intent, but there was no trace of it. Oh no, damn it. In the end, even someone in a high position like the forefather cursed vulgarly. He thought of one possibility. Fuck, don't tell me, the calamity has secretly invaded the ancestral vine. His soul left his body when he came up with this conjecture and he felt his knees giving in. The ancestral vine has been invaded. The Citadel Lord had the same reaction after hearing his forefather. The hammer in his hands fell straight to the ground. That's impossible, the Lord was dumbfounded. Until now, all the ancestors and even the Sunflower Forefather were confident in sealing the calamity within the seal. It was just that they had no way of destroying it. Because of this, they had always been confident. The sealed calamity couldn't cause any damage. It was only a bit problematic that they couldn't destroy it. The seal gave them confidence and the illusion of having ample time to find the right alchemist to get rid of it once and for all. It is gone. The distressed forefather dropped to the ground. At this moment, he knew where it had gone and what they would have to face. He was scared out of his wits just imagining it. No one would be able to reverse this disaster. The Citadel Lord thought of the vine's imminent demise as well. He was dazed while his legs trembled. Is it that serious? Tang Jiwen didn't know the implications of the calamity escaping the seal, so he had to ask after seeing his seniors act this way. Very serious. The forefather calmed down and stood up to take a deep breath. A disaster is looming over our heads. Within just 2 generations, our citadel might turn into ashes. In just 2 generations? Tang Jiwen was shocked. This timeline felt far too short when a real disaster was approaching. The forefather glanced over the broken jade fragments that contained nothing. He was still as amazed as before. How could this have happened? The seal is untouched, so our citadel was not notified. How could it have escaped? You have to understand what this is, Xueqi flatly said. All of you wanted to steal from the villainous heavens. Do you think the punishment it sent down would be this easy to seal? If the bastard was so easily dealt with, it would no longer be the villainous heavens. If it was so easy to oppose him, there would be more than just one immortal emperor in each generation. Tang Jiwen looked over towards Xueqi. Sir, can you cure it? At this moment, Xueqi was the only hope for their citadel. The sunflower forefather smiled wryly and said, It is not a matter of just treating it anymore. The calamity has fled into the ancestral vine's body, and could even have taken root deep inside. We have to go there and remove it at the source, but that might mean uprooting the entire vine. Tang Jiwen's heart fluttered after hearing this. He didn't expect the problem to be so serious. Prior to this, Xueqi had said that their ancestral vine didn't have much longer to live. He was skeptical back then and felt that it was only a threat. Who would have thought that it was the truth? The real issue is that we can't enter. No one has been able to do so for many generations. The Citadel Lord was almost paralyzed on the ground. This news was completely devastating to the Citadel. It caught them off guard like thunder in a clear sky. No, one person was able to enter. The forefather explained. The Supreme Forefather was able to do so. He was the only child of the progenitor. Not only was he a vine controller, he also inherited the bloodline. Tang Jiwen had to ask Xueqi, Sir, you are also a vine controller, can you go inside? Xueqi looked at them and smiled. Right now, I feel like the heaven vine calabash alone is too low of a price. The forefather immediately looked at Xueqi. My lord, what do you want? Just say the word and our citadel will make it happen. He felt that Xueqi could actually succeed in curing the vine at this time. The Citadel Lord added, Yes, please. Anything will be fine. If this was before, they wouldn't be so anxious since they thought that time was on their side. But now, with the new findings on the calamity, they finally understood how insignificant they were. Each and every disciple of the Citadel was willing to protect the ancestral vine regardless of the price. Xueqi glanced at the forefather and slightly narrowed his eyes. If I wanted other things from your citadel, would I need to wait until now? I already reached an agreement with your ancestral vine. Just the calabash will be enough. The rest of the group became quite emotional after hearing this. Keep in mind that regardless of what Xueqi wanted, the citadel would have to give it to him. However, he only wanted the calabash in the end. My lord, the citadel will forever remember your kindness. If you ever need us in the future, just send the command. Our citadel will answer your call and run through fire without question. The forefather kneeled to the ground and made a solemn promise. The Citadel Lord and Tang Jiwen prostrated as well. In their minds, they would owe a debt to Xueqi, one that was higher than the sky and deeper than the sea. Let's go. Xueqi looked at them before turning and walking away. The forefather calmed down and immediately followed behind him. The group eventually came before a mountain. Xueqi slowly pressed his hand against its rocky wall. With a buzz, vine branches drilled out from the muddy ground. The snake-like vine branches instantly wandered all around the cliff. In a short period of time, they wove into a door on its surface. The sunflower forefather murmured after seeing this, The portal into the inner world of the ancestral vine is right here. For millions of years, only the son of the ancestral vine was able to enter this inner world. Xueqi stepped inside with the rest of the group hurrying after him. The scene inside was an eye-opener even for the forefather since this was his very first visit. The master and disciple duo were amazed as well after seeing the branches that resembled dragons. This truly made them understand how invincible their tree father was. Tang Jiwen eventually asked after calming down, Can cultivators reside in this world? Xueqi smiled. Why should its descendants be allowed to stay in this place? So that they can extract the immense vitality within as well? To suck out all of the essences from the depths of the earth? The reason why an ancestral tree can live for so long is due to the life force and essences of this world circulating around their roots without rest. The loss in this process is very minimal. Otherwise, the trees wouldn't last more than 2 generations. He felt that Xueqi's answer was very reasonable. If future generations were allowed into this world, they would refine these energies into their own. After a while, they would squeeze their ancestral tree dry. He understood why they weren't allowed inside either. This was another defensive measure. Chapter 1186. Calamity within the vine was a vast world of gigantic and circling roots. Some soared to the sky to reach close to the clouds. Waterfalls descended from above with mud piles as high as mountains. Some green roots intricately twisted together to resemble gigantic monsters. Dazzling glimmers shone from all over the sky, as if many stars were hanging up there. If there was a difference between the inner worlds of the peacock tree and the heaven vine tree, it would be that the roots here were much more powerful and full of life. The stars above were brighter as well. Tang Jiwen noticed the starlight above and asked, "Are those stars?" The Sunflower Forefather and the Citadel Lord lifted their heads as well since they didn't know the answer. "Those are age stars." Li Qie glanced at them and explained. "The dimming of these age stars signifies the time of withering. It is just like the life rings of a tree. They signify how long the tree has left to live." Tang Jiwen continued to observe the sky. There were too many stars to the point of them being innumerable. However, it was not difficult to find that some of them were significantly darker than their peers. Tang Jiwen heaved a sigh of relief after seeing the countless stars. The Forefather and Citadel Lord felt the same way. The plentiful stars meant that their ancestral vine still had a long lifespan left, so long as Li Qie takes care of the calamity. After a long search, he finally found the main root. It was huge and thick. Standing before it was the same as standing in front of a cliff. He stood at a particular position to peer over everything before speaking. "Right here." The rest of the group looked over to find a little hole. Inside was a blade of grass only around 3 inches tall. There was nothing about it that warranted any attention. It was light green in color with a shade of white due to the lack of sunlight. However, upon a closer inspection, this was not a small blade of grass but tiny particles invisible to the naked eye. These little green particles connected together to form a green electrical arc that looked just like a small grass. "Why is it like this?" The Forefather's expression changed after seeing this, forcing him to take a deep breath. "This is our ancestral vine's calamity?" Both Tang Jiwen and the Citadel Lord were surprised as well. In their minds, their ancestors had been helpless for generations because of it, so it should at least be a frightening and dangerous existence. They imagined that this calamity would have the body of a devil with a demonic smile. Each strand of its aura could burn everything in this world. Who would have thought that this little blade of grass was actually the calamity agonizing their ancestral vine? "We can pull out something like this with one hand," Tang Jiwen blurted, but he immediately realized that he was wrong. If that was possible, why didn't the ancestors do it before instead of waiting for generations? Were these invincible ancestors weaker than a junior? "Then you can try to pull it out." Li Qie smiled. The Citadel Lord realized that his disciple had chosen the wrong words. Not only did they offend Li Qie, they also insulted all the generational ancestors, including the Forefather before them. He busily tried to smooth things out. "Sir, well, my little disciple is ignorant without any sense of propriety. He doesn't see how dangerous." Li Qie gently waved his hand to interrupt him. "It's nothing, I'm not mad at him. He can go ahead and try it once to understand the situation." With that, Tang Jiwen glanced over at his master. The Lord at this moment was helpless and couldn't do anything but nod. In fact, he also wanted to see what kind of ability this little blade of grass had. Tang Jiwen took a deep breath and reached for the grass to pull it out. However, before even touching it, his hands started to tremble. He no longer dared to do so. The reason was very simple. This was their ancestral vine's calamity. Just how frightening and dangerous was this thing? If he touched it, wouldn't it be the same as throwing his life away? "Relax, pull it." Li Qie naturally could tell what he was thinking and smiled. "I'm right here, I won't let you die." With this guarantee, Tang Jiwen calmed down and finally made up his mind. After gritting his teeth, he reached for the grass once more. Bzzz, however, the moment his hand touched the grass, a series of lightning crackles came about. The grass dispersed into countless particles that disappeared into the main root. The whole process gave a sense of something proliferating into the main root with extreme speed. No one could react in time, let alone catch those tiny particles. What is going on? The masters and disciples were lost. At this time, all the roots, regardless of their size in this world, had little lights flashing and crackling inside them. Because of the many roots here that were tightly clinging together or completely woven as one, a lightning arc emerged when all of them flashed together. It came as quick as a bolt of lightning before instantly disappearing. Even though the individual lights were not bright, all of them appearing together was another story. This world completely lit up with each crackle. It was a shocking process, like a sun exploding. It was quite difficult to keep their eyes open in the midst of this light. Who could imagine that this was a scene created by these tiny flashes? Darkness ensued soon afterward. This sudden change was quite difficult to get accustomed to. Tang Jiwen eventually calmed down and asked in horror, "What is this?" "The calamity." The forefather took a deep breath and replied, "It has invaded every root of the ancestral vine. Once it gathers enough power, it will squeeze the ancestral vine dry until there is nothing left." Tang Jiwen shuddered. Every single root that made up the foundation of their citadel was infected. Li Qie dismissively commented, "It is because you all dragged it out for too long. The countless years gave it this chance." The others could only sigh. They never thought that it would escalate to this level. The Citadel Lord couldn't help but ask, "The ancestral vine is invincible, why can't it crush this calamity?" Li Qie chuckled and pointed at the sky to say, "Do you know what kind of existence is suppressing your ancestor? It is that thief, the high heavens. Returning and taking root in this earth is already going against him. If your ancestor rebels again, it would bring about a supreme repression that would instantly render the tree into ashes unless there was someone as strong as an immortal emperor helping to stop this heavenly punishment. Otherwise, the relentless onslaught from both inside and out isn't something it can withstand. Rather than immediately turning into ashes, it is better to live a borrowed life and wait for you juniors to expel the calamity." He looked at the sunflower forefather after saying this. The forefather's old face turned red as he coughed. This situation was the fault of ancestors like him. He had to admit, "It is all due to our incompetence. We couldn't help our ancestral vine and thought that the calamity had been successfully sealed." Bzzz. A tiny crackle resounded from Tang Jiwen's body. Faint lights emerged from his body in the form of bright particles. He was suddenly wrapped in this layer of lightning. What's happening? He was scared out of his wits after seeing this. He tried to pat the particles away from his body, but before he could touch them, the particles immediately dispersed and entered his body. Chapter 1187. Treatment Crackle. The particles resurfaced just a moment later. Moreover, their numbers had greatly increased, as if more had just been produced. The aghast youth screamed, "Master, save me! Sir, please save my little disciple." The Citadel Lord didn't expect this to happen at all. His soul left his body from fear as he quickly asked Li Qie for help. "Don't move about," the sunflower forefather shouted. "This is an infection. The more you try to resist, the stronger it will become. You are not the ancestral vine, so it can refine you right away." After hearing this, Tang Jiwen couldn't stand straight anymore from fear. He asked Li Qie to help as well. "Sir, please save me." After seeing the boy's appearance, Li Qie laughed and shook his head. "You are exaggerating things. With me here, there's no need to be so alarmed. It is not like I will stand by and watch you die." Tang Jiwen heaved a sigh of relief after hearing this. With Li Qie's assurance, it seemed that his life would be saved. Not bad. Li Qie glanced at the particles on his body. Not only is it untouchable as it will disperse right away, it can also spread with extreme speed. Unfortunately, it has met me. With a smirk, he took out the myriad heavenly cauldron and easily extracted a bunch of fiery strands. Li Qie looked at Tang Jiwen and said, "Don't move or resist, just let it be." He nodded after taking a deep breath. "I'll keep that in mind." Before he could finish, Li Qie had already begun inserting strands of fire into his body one after another. All of a sudden, he was like a rag doll with numerous strands of fire going in and out of his body. As these tiny fire strings drilled into his body, he didn't feel hot at all. On the contrary, he felt cold lines running through his blood vessels. This chill seemed to be able to freeze his blood. One would find this difficult to believe, especially if they weren't personally experiencing it. The scorching fire from Li Qie's cauldron was actually cool. After a while, he had the illusion that blood was no longer running through his body, that a cold fire had replaced it. At this time, Li Qie began to recall the strands of fire. In the beginning, Tang Jiwen didn't feel anything, but shortly afterward, He felt as if very tiny particles were being pulled out along with these strands. These particles latched onto the strands and left his body. More and more light particles attached themselves to Li Qia's fire, as if it was a magnet that was absorbing all of them from the youth's body. Ting Jiwen eventually felt his body becoming lighter. There was an indescribable sense of ease. He knew then that all of the particles had been dragged out by Li Qia. Boom! In a split second, the flame in the cauldron surged and turned vicious. It refined all of the particles taken out of Tang Jiwen's body. Although these particles wanted to attack, the cauldron was simply too ferocious. Under Li Qia's control, there was no chance for a reversal. They were incinerated right away. "Thank you for saving my life, sir." Ting Jiwen was relieved and prostrated on the ground. The Citadel Lord did the same and gratefully said, "Sir, your skill is unrivaled in this world." The forefather witnessed Li Qia's supreme alchemy and became relieved as well. Their citadel has finally met their savior. The ancestral vine can finally be saved. In the next couple of days, the disciples of the citadel could feel a change in the atmosphere. The whole place became quite tense. Several days later, their ancestral vine suddenly trembled, as did the citadel. Some palaces and mountains even collapsed. In this short period of time, all of the disciples became restless and felt that a disaster that could descend at any time was looming over their heads. In particular, the ancestors knew the gravity of the situation. The entire citadel entered the highest state of alert and was ready to help at any time in case something happens. These anxiety-filled days eventually came to an end. Although the disciples didn't know what was going on, they could sense that the clouds had melted along with the dispersing mists. Some even felt that their ancestral vine's branches were stretching as if the disaster had passed. The ancestors finally found solace. The citadel was saved. In these few days, Li Qia was brought outside by the forefathers' group. He was very tired from extinguishing the calamity at this moment. He was treated as the most esteemed guest. Even the forefather himself personally stood guard for him, not letting anyone come close to disturb his rest. Li Qia took out all types of immortal medicines. He had spent a lot of blood energy to destroy the calamity, but his recovery was quite swift. After he recovered, the forefather came to see him. He bowed the moment he saw Li Qia and said, "Your kindness cannot be described by words. Just give us a command in the future if you ever require our service." Li Qia gently nodded and waved his sleeve. "Rise, a deal is a deal. Since I have promised you, I will naturally carry out my end of the bargain." Nevertheless, the forefather still felt very grateful. He respectfully held the heaven vine calabash and spoke. "This is the calabash that you wanted, please take a look." Li Qia glanced at it and put it away. This brought him one step closer to replenishing the peacock tree's lifespan. The forefather hurriedly asked, "May I ask if you would be willing to spend more time at our citadel so that we can do our best as your host?" Li Qia looked at him and quipped, "Don't tell me you want me to become your citadel's disciple?" "No, I wouldn't dare." The forefather quickly waved his palms back and forth. "Ah, sir, you are the true dragon above the 9 heavens. The Heaven Vine Citadel is too tiny and cannot accommodate you. If you are willing to take the title of being our vine controller, it would be our honor." The forefather was certainly eager for Li Qia to stay. If this was possible, then their citadel could rise once again. Li Qia only smiled and shook his head. "I am only a passerby for your citadel and the heaven spirit world. This horizon is not my home. I am only here for some sightseeing." The forefather sighed and replied, "Sir, you are a peerless master. I suppose the citadel doesn't have this fortune." He understood that an opportunity like this couldn't be forced. It was not meant to be for their citadel. Li Qia flatly stated, "Ting Jiwen from your citadel is not bad, so I will have him follow me for a bit. I won't teach him other things, but with regards to your ancestral vine, I will teach him a few secrets. I have gained some insights after communicating with your ancestral vine, so I'll be passing that back to your citadel." After reaching an agreement with the ancestral vine, Li Qia had a deeper understanding of its origin. This is his fortune. The forefather was ecstatic and quickly cupped his fists before immediately calling someone to bring Tang Jiwen over. In just a moment, both Tang Jiwen and his master came. After hearing this, Tang Jiwen was elated. His master was quite happy for him as well. Today, Tang Jiwen becoming the next successor was set in stone. If he could learn more from the ancestral vine, he would definitely be able to shine in the future. Thank you for your guidance. The Citadel Lord calmed down and quickly dragged Teng Jiwen, who was still standing there silly, to the ground to express his gratitude. Rise. Li Qiye said, after communicating with your ancestral vine, I only focused on a few matters that I found interesting. As for your vine's knowledge, it is of no use to me, so I will return it to your citadel. This is a type of fate, a natural part of life. In spite of this, the Citadel Lord was still very happy for his disciple. This would definitely be a way to help him communicate with the ancestral vine. Okay, go back and prepare. Li Qiye gently waved his hand. You are to meet me at Shallow Beach. I will go on ahead. Teng Jiwen respectfully bowed and immediately went to prepare. Li Qiye had other business. He had obtained the calabash, so he didn't want to stay at the Heaven Vine Citadel for too long. He departed on this very day. At this time, outside of the Sunflower Forefather himself, all of the high-ranking ancestors also went to see him off. The Forefather really wanted Li Qiye to stay for several more days so that they could treat him even better, but he didn't dare to hold Li Qiye back as he insisted on leaving. Take care of yourselves. Li Qiye looked at the Forefather before casually pointing with his finger. A portal emerged. He stepped inside and instantly crossed through space. Chapter 1188. Shallow Beach was surrounded with blue skies and white clouds as well as a green sea laden with underwater shoals. Occasionally, some peaks would be exposed on the surface of the water. One side was a cliff while the other was a beach with white sand wetted by the undulating waves. There were also seabirds flying in the air while fishes leaped out of the water. It was a peaceful and beautiful scene. The truth was that the beach was not actually quiet. This was only on the surface of the sea. The undersea was where it was lively. Mountains ran next to chasms while seaweed swayed to the current among the forests of coral. Some sea trees towered from down below as well. The name Shallow Beach didn't mean that it was a shallow sea. It was because this place was close to the surface, hence the name. Pavilions and palaces were built below the beach, coming together to form an underwater city. Streets and bridges led to all the corners of the city. It was very prosperous and busy, a beautiful world under the sea. The structures were immersed in water. Some expelled water and formed their own space just like the mainland. People came and went to Shallow Beach. Some rode seahorses straight through the water without being stained at all, while others rode their silent shuttles with great speed. Those who were part of the sea rode gigantic whales and glided through the water without losing their elegance. Among the crowd were elegant charming spirits, tree ants with oppressive wood affinities, and many bizarre sea demons. Some walked through the city completely unstained by the water so they looked quite graceful. Some avoided the sea and chose passages with invisible walls that pushed the water out. Others were completely soaked by the water, and some sea demons maintained their demonic form to move even quicker. This beach was a property of the Void Imperfection 3 schools. To be more exact, it was part of the Void Imperfection School. Because of this, the city was very peaceful. Sea demons and tree ants wouldn't dare to cause trouble here. The Void Imperfection 3 schools weren't only famous in the Jade Sea, they were even renowned across the entire Heaven Spirit world. They were monsters that could cause a huge flood with one stomp. The Void Imperfection School was created by Immortal Emperor Wu Go. In future generations, it was divided into 3 different schools. The Void Imperfection School, the Evil Devourer School, and the Sacred Spring School. Even though it was divided into 3 separate schools, it was still a singular heritage. More often than not, they still communicated with outsiders as one sect. This was the lineage with the greatest amount of immortal physiques. Someone once said that in terms of having the most immortal physiques, there was no sect but the Void Imperfection 3 schools, even when taking into account all of the 9 worlds. The progenitor of the school was Immortal Emperor Wu Go. Not only was he an emperor, he had also cultivated the Void Imperfection physique to grand completion. Later on, they had another 2 grand completion immortal physiques. These 2 didn't cultivate the Void Imperfection physique but the Heaven Devourer evil physique and the Sacred Spring physique respectively. In other words, the school once had 3 different people with different grand completion immortal physiques. This was a great achievement in all of the 9 worlds, hence their reputation. Shallow Beach belonged to the Void Imperfection School. Because of this, people built this great undersea city without seeing trouble or opposition. In an inn down below, Li Qiye sat near a window to watch the street while drinking his wine. This inn was quite interesting. It was built next to a mountain, and above it was a whirlpool that was used to brew the very famous wine they served. He continued to drink while watching fishes swim right beside him. Occasionally, one or two naughty crabs would climb on his table and, to his amusement, raise their claws to intimidate him. He was untouched by a single drop of water. It was no different than sitting in an inn on land. After finishing another cup, he shouted, "Boss, another cup." "Coming." The boss of this place answered right away. He was a sea demon with a muscular build. Perhaps his ancestor used to be a whale demon because there were still two clumps of flesh that resembled a beard on his chin. This was the most recognizable characteristic. A tiny whirlpool split from the larger one at the top of the inn and streamed down into Li Qia's cup after the boss affirmation, instantly filling it to the brim. Li Qia smiled and continued to drink. Such an amazing scene could only happen at the heaven spirit world. As a human, he was the most conspicuous in this inn. After all, humans were quite rare outside of Peacock Land and the Exquisite Valley. It wasn't easy to spot them in other locations. Of course, no one came to cause trouble either. The customers were only curious about a human, so they looked at him a few more times out of curiosity. While Li Qia was drinking, a luxurious boat docked outside of the inn. The entire hull was outlined with gold and decorated with an emblem reserved for royalty. It was both extravagant and imposing. Such a big ship swimming in the sea seemed to become one with the ocean. However, it was also completely unstained by the water, which made it very obvious to others that it was an incredible treasure. Someone noticed the royal emblem hanging on the ship and asked in astonishment, "A ship from the profound sea dynasty, why is it here?" Shortly afterward, a maiden walked down from the lavish boat. She was charmingly beautiful like an aureole. Her long dress dragging on the ground revealed a very noble aura. There were several followers behind her, making her great status apparent. Someone recognized her identity after she came inside the inn and whispered, "Gong Sun Qianer, why is someone from the profound sea god Monarcha's camp here at the Jade Sea?" The girl went up to the inn and ordered some wine and dishes without saying anything else. Li Qia only looked at her once without paying too much attention. He finished his wine and called for the boss. After handing the money over, he asked, "Boss, have the doors to the Void Imperfection School opened yet?" "Great Immortal, this lowly one doesn't know too well." The boss rubbed his palms together and smiled awkwardly. "I am only a little merchant, so I don't know anything about the world of immortals." Li Qia couldn't help but laugh, then leisurely say, "Is that so? I was actually hoping to ask you more about the ancestral whale. How could this lowly one know anything about such grand events? Immortal, you should ask the disciples from the Void Imperfection School about it." The boss smiled wryly. Not too many people cared when Li Qia mentioned the ancestral whale because they didn't know what it was. However, the girl who sat not too far from him furrowed her brows after hearing the words, ancestral whale. She came from a great background and had heard her master talk about it, so after Li Qia brought it up, she looked at him and shouted, "Hey! You were asking about the ancestral whale of the Void Imperfection 3 schools?" Li Qia lazily glanced at her without responding. He looked back at the boss and said, "In that case, never mind then." Gong Sun Qianer was not happy about being ignored. Her expression sank as she coldly said, "Just a human yet you still dare to be pretentious?" She was used to being arrogant. Her boss was a concubine of the profound sea god monarch. As her master's confidant, she could be said to be able to call for winds and rains back in the profound sea dynasty. But now, a little human was ignoring her. "Boy, are you listening? My master is talking to you." Her follower immediately shouted at him. Li Qia didn't bother with them and turned to leave. Her entourage couldn't stand it any longer, so they slammed the table before standing up, wanting to stop him. Great Immortals, please don't be angry." The boss immediately tried to smooth things over. "Arguing here will disturb the peace of Shallow Beach. Please take it easy on us." "Forget it. It's only an ignorant junior." Gong Sun Qianer waved her sleeve in a cold fashion and snorted while looking at Li Qia's back. She didn't really care for a human brat like him, but this was the territory of the Void Imperfection School, so she didn't want to cause trouble here. After leaving the inn, Li Qia headed south until he arrived in front of a huge trench. With the sun shining down, this was a place full of green rocks and seagrass, giving people a very comfortable and peaceful feeling. In the heaven spirit world, every single sea, even at their deepest depths, could enjoy sunlight. Legend states that there were two suns in the heaven spirit world. One illuminated the sky and the continents while the other shone down on the bottom of the seas. Because of this, underwater creatures could bask in its gentle warmth as well. Chapter 1189. Yi-Tu. A little courtyard was located in this trench. The seawater steered clear from it, revealing old green tiles. One glance was enough to tell that this little home had been built a long time ago. Xueqi went inside to find a young man lazily basking in the sun. He looked a little over 20, but despite his young age, he had an aura of sophistication and maturity. The young man immediately stood up when Xueqi approached. He cupped his fists and smiled. "May I ask what you are here for, sir?" Xueqi looked him up and down before speaking. "You are a disciple of the Void Imperfection School, correct?" The youth answered right away. "Yes, my name is Yi-Tu from the Charming Spirit Race, the Void Imperfection Supervisor of the Shallow Beach Branch." Xueqi insipidly revealed. "I know, charming spirits make up the majority at the three schools and have been in control for generations. The demon boss at the inn is an exception. A disciple like that is quite rare in your sect." "Ah." Yi-Tu smiled and said, "Sir, you must be talking about my senior uncle. He likes to play around." He looked at the youth and declared, "I want to visit the Void Imperfection School. It is good that you are the supervisor here. Let me in so I won't have to barge in myself." Yi-Tu scratched his head in response. "May I ask for your name, sir?" "Xueqi." Xueqi calmly answered. "There's no need to tell you my race, right?" Xueqi. When Yi-Tu heard this name, he was shocked to the point where he almost jumped. He took a careful look at Xueqi. "Are you wondering why I don't have the aura of an imperial bloodline?" Xueqi nonchalantly spoke after noticing the youth's reaction. "Well," Yi-Tu rubbed his palms and coughed before smiling. "I wouldn't dare. It is just that my vision is lacking and can't see through brotherly at all." "Your choice of words isn't bad." Xueqi smiled. "Did Golden Isle inform your schools?" "We received their message not long ago." The youth replied, "I heard Brother Lee had left Golden Isle, so the elders there asked our Charming Spirit Race to keep an eye out and help you if necessary. The Void Imperfection 3 schools were lineages of charming spirits while Golden Isle was a Trey-Ant lineage. Logically speaking, Golden Isle should have informed the Trey-Ants first. There was a reason why Golden Isle did it this way. It was because the charming spirits were even more eager than them to marry humans with noble bloodlines. In fact, they married more humans than the sea demons and Trey-Ants added together." "As their groom?" Xueqi laughed. He understood their hidden intentions. "Ah, I heard you haven't married the golden daughter from the Isle yet, correct?" Yi-Tu smiled and immediately brought a chair for Xueqi to sit in. Golden Isle informed them in order to let the three schools know that Xueqi was already their groom and to not compete for this bloodline with them. In fact, at the Jade Sea, the behemoths like the three schools had received a lot of information. For example, Xueqi, with his imperial bloodline, had been kidnapped by someone. Xueqi sat down coolly without any reservation. Meanwhile, Yi-Tu was very enthusiastic and showed good hospitality as well. "It is our honor to have Brother Lee here at Shallow Beach. I represent the beach to thank you for granting us this chance." Yi-Tu quickly poured some tea for Xueqi, playing his part as a good host. Xueqi smiled after hearing the flattering words. He touched his chin and leisurely mused. "I never thought I had such charm before. Brother Lee is a master the likes of which rarely appears. A meeting with you has to be the blessing of fate. Despite your noble status, you have no hint of arrogance." The youth smiled. Xueqi took a sip and asked, "So? You want to betroth your senior sister or your junior sister to me?" Yi-Tu had no response to Xueqi's directness. After a while he grinned. "If you are willing to be our guest at the Void Imperfection School, you can have your pick." Xueqi just smiled and shook his head. "Forget it, don't make me participate in this noble cause. In your minds, I am only a stallion to produce more royal bloodlines for the charming spirits to groom another immortal emperor. Just like immortal Emperor Yen Shi. Nothing could be better than having this bloodline join their school." The enthusiastic youth gave some orders to other disciples before bringing Xueqi to his school. Very few people could enter the Void Imperfection School. Only certain talents with some influence were able to. Moreover, not too many knew where the school was located. The only thing others knew was that the school's ancestral ground was not stationary. They were aware that it was built around the territory of the school itself, but the exact location was unknown. On the other hand, Li Qie knew exactly where the school was located. However, he wanted to go there in a friendly manner this time, so he didn't forcefully enter. Blue skies along with the blue sea and the occasional wafting clouds painted a scenic view worthy of a poem. Yi Tu and Li Qie stepped onto a white cloud. The scene suddenly changed. A flying continent was before them with rolling mountains and faint valleys. This was a nature-filled place with gurgling streams accompanied by buildings and temples. This continent floating in the sky seemed incredibly surreal, just like a painting. People would think that this was a paradise, taking their breath away with its beauty. It turned out that the ancestral ground of the Void Imperfection School was hidden among the clouds. This group of clouds traveled around this region of the sea. Because of this, no one knew where the school was actually built. Visitors were met with serenity. Many of the ancient buildings with closed doors had been unoccupied for a long time. Even the ones with open doors seemed to have no signs of people. Occasionally on one or two hills, a few disciples could be found sweeping the leaves away from relatively newer temples. Nevertheless, this didn't break the tranquility of this area. Outsiders would be shocked at this scene. With so few disciples, no one would believe that this was the greatest lineage in the heaven spirit world. In the minds of many, a great lineage should have plenty of talents and geniuses that appeared in waves. As for regular disciples, they should number in the millions. After so many years, your branch is still the same. Peaceful and taking things easy. It is remarkable that such an inheritance has continued this way until now. Li Qie emotionally murmured while looking at the tranquil mountains and rivers. The Void Imperfection School was different from the other two schools. It rarely appeared or let anyone inside. Outside of the three schools themselves, outsiders didn't know how many disciples it had. Yi Tu explained. Many senior and junior uncles are traveling and training. A few senior brothers and sisters also went outside, leaving only us, the young ones, behind to take care of the trivial matters in the sect. Chapter 1190. Void Imperfection Schoolmaster. The Great Void Imperfection School was unique and very different from other lineages. Each generation slowly spread outside. Regardless of their status, both high elders and ordinary disciples would travel everywhere. More often than not, they wouldn't participate in worldly affairs or get involved with cultivation feuds. To a large extent, they pursued freedom and serenity. Because of this, it was difficult to find the disciples from this sect in the heaven spirit world. For many lineages, especially the larger ones, their disciples would band together to live in the cultivation world for both resource competition and wars. Thus, it was often quite eventful for these sections. In this respect, the Void Imperfection School was different from others. Its gate and ancestral courtyard were completely empty. If one didn't know about this place beforehand, they would wonder if they had come to the wrong location. Thus, the traveling disciples were rather undisciplined, but no one in the heaven spirit world has been able to shake the school's status or have any ideas about them. From this, one could see that the three schools have enough power to deal with any kind of trouble. Their true power was difficult to fathom. Yi Tu took Li Qie to an old temple with a very imposing presence. Just one look was enough to tell how extraordinary it was. However, one would find that this place had not been cleaned in a long time. Dust had accumulated into layers in some places. An imperial lineage being so lazy was truly difficult to believe. When inside the temple, one would see a rocking chair with a man lying on it. In fact, it was very easy to miss him due to the leaves that covered him. He was deep in sleep. After seeing this situation, others would most likely think that he was already dead. Schoolmaster, Brother Li is here to see you. Yi Tu bowed in front of this sleeping man. Leaves began to fall as the man opened his eyes and stood up. Just how long had he been sleeping here to accumulate this many layers of leaves? He eventually revealed his appearance without the leaves. This was a very thin elder dressed like a commoner. He looked like an ordinary old man without any noteworthy aspects. However, the occasional glimmer in his eyes showed that he was a hidden master. Is this the young noble Li with the imperial bloodline? He immediately judged Li Qie after waking up. Yi Tu quickly replied, Schoolmaster, Brother Li is indeed the groom from Golden Isle. Before he could finish, the Void Imperfection Schoolmaster interrupted him and corrected. Little Yi, how can you say that? Young noble Li has yet to marry and he won't necessarily marry that little girl from Golden Isle. so how can he be their groom? That's true, that's true. Yi Tu understood and smiled while nodding. Li Qie only chuckled after seeing this. Meanwhile, the schoolmaster circled around Li Qie to take a good look. He seemed to be carefully appreciating Li Qie, similar to how in-laws might like their son-in-law more and more. Li Qie happily let him do as he pleased while taking a seat on the rocking chair. The schoolmaster ignored his lack of formality and cheerfully smiled. Virtuous nephew, your fame is like thunder ringing in my ears. You are the prodigy of the human race, the hero of the world. These words are too fake. Li Qie couldn't help but smile while shaking his head. Schoolmaster, there's no need to flatter me. I know myself very well. I am only a nobody at the heaven spirit world. This ringing thunder bit, it is just artificial rhetoric. The schoolmaster didn't mind being called out. He gave a thumbs up and said, Virtuous nephew, you are quite straightforward and genuine like a real man. Since you are here as a guest, it truly brightens up this place. Don't be reserved. Just consider my school as your home. Li Qie smiled and shook his head, then he went straight to the point. My time is limited, so I won't stay for long. I want to meet your ancestral whale to take something away. The ancestral whale? The schoolmaster was startled. He dryly coughed and shook his head. Virtuous nephew, I'm not trying to make things difficult for you, but since you know of the ancestral whale, you should know how hard it is to meet it. In fact, even I would find it difficult. I know, which is why I'm asking you to learn where it has run off to. Li Qie nodded. The schoolmaster gently shook his head. I won't lie to you. I don't know where it is going either. This is a secret. Li Qie looked at him. I do not doubt your words. The ancestral whale of the three schools travels around the vast seas in the heaven spirit world without leaving behind a trace. Outside of your whale riders, no outsiders truly know of its whereabouts. Yes, yes. The schoolmaster smilingly replied. It is good that you understand, but... Li Qie slowly continued. I know that the school has a method of communicating with the ancestral whale. I believe you should know about it. Well. The schoolmaster contemplated for a bit before looking back at Li Qie with a grin. That is true as well. If you really want to see the ancestral whale, I can discuss it with the ancestors. If they agree, then you can definitely see it, but before then, why not stay at our place? We definitely welcome you here. Li Qie gently shook his head again. I think you misunderstand something. I am not only here to see the ancestral whale, I also want to go to the Void Imperfection Spring to fetch some water. This alarmed both the schoolmaster and Yi Tuesday. The schoolmaster, in particular, took one step back right away and put on a vigilant expression. Schoolmaster, there's no need to be so alarmed. If I wanted to take some by force, I wouldn't be here speaking to you like this. Li Qie noticed their response and smiled. I don't know too much about the Void Imperfection Spring. The schoolmaster shook his head. At this time, he had become a lot colder and didn't have the same enthusiasm as before. It was a tremendous change in attitude. Li Qie only laughed. Schoolmaster, I'm not here to exchange friendly words with you or to hear your excuses. I only want to tell you that I will meet the ancestral whale as well as fetch water from the spring. Virtuous nephew, do you wish to use force? The schoolmaster's face turned darker. This old man is not deliberately making things difficult for you. If you know about the spring, then you should definitely know that not just anyone can go there. Outside of a few ancestors, others aren't allowed. I am aware. Li Qie said. The Void Imperfection Spring is a place that has obtained the fortune of the heavens. In the past, immortal Emperor Wu Go spent countless efforts to bring the spring here. One can say that it didn't originally belong to you. Here he glanced at the schoolmaster and continued. The emperor moved the spring to the ancestral whale first. From then on, it became yours and outsiders couldn't see it any longer. I don't know much about the past. The schoolmaster dismissively said. I can only apologize since I am not in charge of anything relating to the spring. Li Qie smirked and declared. Regardless of whether you are in charge or not, I will see the ancestral whale and take water from the spring. Are you always so forceful like this? The schoolmaster's eyes turned fierce and flashed a glint that crossed through time and space. This truly showed how powerful he was. Who said that I'm being forceful? Li Qie smiled and stood up while reaching out with his hand. Yi Tu was scared by this and thought that Li Qie wanted to fight. At the same time, the schoolmaster put up his guard to fight against Li Qie at any moment. However, Li Qie didn't attack the two. He simply took down a group of clouds from the sky. He casually kneaded them to make the clouds float in front of him. Next, he sat down on them, letting them slowly lift him up for a spin before coming back down. The void imperfection clouds. The schoolmaster was surprised after seeing this, not believing his own eyes. Yi too was shocked as well. He had heard about these clouds since a young age. They had always been floating there, but he had never heard of anyone capable of bringing them down or riding them. This was Li Qie's first time here, yet he could easily ride them. To Yi too, this was simply incredible. My ancestors had a relationship with immortal Emperor Wu Go. They left behind a certain something that has allowed me to take down a group of clouds today. Li Qie said in a matter-of-fact manner. Of course, this was only a casual excuse. The person who knew immortal Emperor Wu Go was none other than him. Chapter 1191, Bloodline. After seeing the void imperfection clouds, the schoolmaster became less tense and patted his chest. Then you are one of us, we can talk freely. With that, his face turned a bit bitter as he looked at Li Qie. If you only took the clouds down in the beginning, then we wouldn't have had to do anything. I received quite a scare just now. My old bones can't handle this torture. Sorry, I just arrived at the school so I forgot. Li Qie smiled in response. Both the schoolmaster and Yi too calmed down. They didn't want to fight at all. The schoolmaster told Li Qie, our void imperfection 3 schools do have an ancestral teaching. Seeing as how you could bring down the clouds, you are part of our family, so we won't say no. Li Qie gently nodded. If immortal Emperor Wu Go has left behind a teaching, then nothing can be better. I have no other requests. Like before, I only want to take water from the void imperfection spring. I'm sure it will be fine. The schoolmaster quickly said. Let me go report this to the ancestors to find out the ancestral whale's location. Once we find out, I'll inform you immediately. Li Qie agreed. Very good. Let me know when you find out. I'll be staying at Shallow Beach in the meantime. Having said that, he stood up. The schoolmaster noticed that he was about to leave, so he rubbed his palms together and attempted to hold the guest back. With a big grin, he insisted. It wasn't easy for you to come here, so why not stay for a while? Check out our pretty sceneries and allow me to play the part of a good host. Li Qie laughed and told the schoolmaster. Don't tell me you want me to pick a bunch of ladies from the school? Such words were very direct, so the schoolmaster coughed awkwardly. He became a bit embarrassed and smiled. If you like any lass from our school, you can take her away any time. A girl isn't an object. Li Qie chuckled and shook his head. The schoolmaster grinned, but he spoke with a serious tone. All along in the heaven spirit world, many things remain unchanging. It was this way in the past and shall be this way in the future. Who can escape the trend of reproduction for the greatness of a race? Yes, and it's not just the heaven spirit world. A few things will never change in the 9 worlds. Li Qie had grown accustomed to this type of marriage. This matter happened a lot in the rest of the 9 worlds as well. Countless lineages sought alliances forged through marriage. However, the 3 grand races here were a bit different. They wanted excellent human bloodlines to have descendants with brilliant talents and bloodlines. The schoolmaster earnestly said, Virtuous nephew, you have an imperial bloodline. Even if you don't care for the charming spirits or the other races, you should still consider doing something for your own sake. Your precious bloodline should be passed down. In this regard, do you think there is a more suitable race than us charming spirits to be your match? This was not boasting. There were many races in the 9 worlds, but none of them dared to claim to be better than the charming spirits. They were called the favorites of the heavens. This was not something they claimed themselves but a fact recognized by many races. Li Qie looked at him and said, Your void imperfection school wants more than just an excellent bloodline. You also want to imitate immortal Emperor Gu Chun's 4 branches as well as train an ultimate immortal emperor, even if it is a human. It is not just our school. The other charming spirits, Treants, and sea demons are also doing the same. Am I wrong? The schoolmaster replied. Li Qie insipidly said, The legend is not necessarily true. Among the charming spirits and even the entire heaven spirit world, there was a legend. It states that when an imperial bloodline from the human race comes together with an excellent charming spirit bloodline, the result would be the further perfection and strengthening of the human bloodline. At the same time, the charming spirit's bloodline would increase in potency, and its potential would be excavated to the extreme. This all started with immortal Emperor Yen Shi. She was an extremely unbelievable immortal emperor, so people took note of the conditions surrounding her. In fact, there was some evidence of this later on as well. After the emperor, the 4 branches of immortal Emperor Gu Chun passed down even better bloodlines, giving them a large number of outstanding bloodlines. With this result, the future generations believed that a human imperial bloodline had a great effect in enhancing the bloodlines of charming spirits. Due to this, human imperial bloodlines were especially welcomed whenever they appeared in the heaven spirit world. They were absolutely the best among stallions. Well, without trying, how would we know if it is true or not? The schoolmaster chuckled. The schoolmaster really wanted Li Qie to stay at the 3 schools. If they could have his bloodline as well, it would fortify their status. Oh, you want to steal Golden Isle's groom? Li Qie couldn't help but chuckle. If I am not mistaken, your Void Imperfection School has never interfered with mundane matters or competed with others. The schoolmaster gave a natural smile in response. Nephew, you still haven't married the miss from the Yi clan yet, so how can this be considered stealing their groom? Plus, even if you had married, this is no big deal. Since the start of time, heroes would always have many companions. I see. You want me to turn into the best stud to spread my seed everywhere. Li Qie laughed and shook his head. Unfortunately, I have no interest in this. The schoolmaster opened his mouth in order to say something, but Li Qie waved his hand. I'm not interested, even if you provide better conditions. It's not like Golden Isle hasn't tried before, either. The schoolmaster could only softly sigh after hearing this, but he didn't give up. You are still one of us, our doors will always be open for you. One day when you are tired of drifting in this world, you can come and stay with us here, at Void Imperfection. Thank you. Li Qie didn't refuse the schoolmaster's kindness. He flashed a quick smile before turning around to leave. He went back to Shallow Beach afterward. Meanwhile, Yi Tu stayed with him the entire time, entertaining him with great enthusiasm. You are the regional supervisor here, don't you have work to do? Li Qie looked at him with one eye and asked after seeing the youth working so hard. Yi Tu smiled and replied, Our Void Imperfection School aims for serenity and going with the flow. There is normally nothing to do, so we just sit there in a daze. Since you are here as our guest, let me be as good of a host as possible, lest others consider us to be inadequate with our hospitality. Li Qie smiled and knew that this was the schoolmaster's idea, so he didn't chase him away. After 2 days, Tang Jiwen finally came. He bowed after seeing Li Qie. By the command of the forefather, this junior is here to obey your commands, sir. Just let me know when you require my service. There's no need for formalities, I am not that old. Li Qie gently waved his sleeve and told him to stand up. Yi Tu also recognized Tang Jiwen and quickly chatted with him. If the 2 of you want to follow me, come then. Li Qie glanced at the 2 before leaving Shallow Beach. The 2 looked at each other, not knowing what Li Qie wanted to do. Regardless, they hurried to catch up to him. After leaving the beach, they continued traveling quite far on the seabed. This was the Void Imperfection School's territory, so whether it was the surface or the seabed, Yi Tu was very familiar with it. He looked at the scene along the way and murmured, Ahead is the bottomless trench, are we really going there? Yes and no. Li Qie answered while comfortably leading the way. He strode forward while remaining untouched by the water as if he was gliding through the liquid. This manner of movement was very elegant, like drifting clouds flowing with the current. Yi Tu calculated the time and said, The season of the needlefish is almost upon us. Young noble, could it be that you are here for them? Needlefish. Li Qie smiled and shook his head. You are underestimating me too much. Needlefish can indeed be regarded as precious. However, a fish king can barely be considered top grade, they can't get into my eyes. The bottomless trench? Tang Jiwen thought about a legend and speculated. Sir, are you here for the legendary sea-crossing shuttle then? Yes and no. Li Qie smiled and flatly said. Your thinking might not be as quick as Yi Tu, but you are much more meticulous than him. Sea-crossing shuttle? Yi Tu heard this name and was surprised. Legend states that the shuttle hasn't appeared for a very long time. Until now, all 3 great races of the heaven spirit world have been searching down at the bottomless trench, especially us charming spirits who do so every single generation. Certain things will appear when the time is right. The disappearance was only due to outsiders not knowing about its existence. Li Qie plainly explained. Like your ancestral whale, it also disappeared to those who are unable to see it. Yi too felt that this explanation made sense. Chapter 1192. Bottomless Trench. According to legend, the bottomless trench was the deepest and longest trench in the heaven spirit world. For many years, many people have explored this particular trench, but none were able to do so fully. Someone once said that this trench was long enough to cross the entire Jade Sea. Its depths remained a mystery because no one had been able to reach the bottom. It spanned further than the territory of the Void Imperfection 3 schools and brought about a different landscape to this region. This was especially true when they were closer to the 3 schools. It had been said that this end of the trench near Shallow Beach was the most beautiful stretch. When Li Qie's group got close, they saw a beautiful sight full of coral forests. This coral field might span for thousands of miles along the 2 sides of the trench. Such a great field was truly spectacular, a sight only found at the heaven spirit world. There were all kinds of colorful coral of varying shapes and sizes as far as the eye could see. Some were as large as trees that grew from the bottom of the sea all the way to the surface. Under these trees, groups of seaweed swayed about with happy fishes. There were also caves full of shrimps and crabs as well as large turtles lounging about. Some grew in a crisscross pattern and intertwined into a huge maze. If one entered this cave of coral, they would surely get lost. All in all, this field was a dazzling spectacle of indescribable and unforgettable charm. A depression could be found after crossing through this field completely. This was the renowned bottomless trench. It was broad to the point that it seemed to split the whole sea apart. It was completely black. Looking down into the trench was like looking into the gaping jaws of a monster that would devour anything that fell into it, a cause for fear and awe. The group stopped inside the coral forest and didn't proceed further. Here, Li Qie meticulously examined a huge coral. The two of them didn't know what Li Qie wanted to do. They stood behind him with bated breaths and didn't dare to disturb him. Next, Li Qie moved as swift as lightning. His fingers swept forward with a speed beyond the two's perception. He then spread his palms before Tang Jiwen and Yi Tu to show an insect with fuzzy hair around the length of a finger. This insect was squirming on his palm and gave quite a creepy feeling. Li Qie plainly spoke. I know, to be able to cultivate the physique to this level, you can indeed handle the schoolmaster position. She was not offended by his rather rude and haughty attitude and sat down next to him on the water's surface. We haven't been able to show our hospitality to you ever since you arrived. Her noble demeanor was also natural and quite approachable. Li Qie waved his hand and interrupted her. Speak if you will and fart if you must, do not beat around the bush with me. I'm not in the mood to guess and waste time. Such an overbearing attitude made her secretly lament the situation. As one of the schoolmasters from Void Imperfection, she was quite an influential person. However, Li Qie simply didn't take her to heart. Eventually, she took a deep breath and earnestly spoke. I would like to invite you to my sacred spring school as a guest. I see, so it is still the same. Everyone views me as the greatest stallion. No doubt, you want me to go there and find various ladies to get close to and take my seed. These words were too direct and sexual, leaving Xueqi momentarily speechless. An imperial bloodline like Li Qie's was too precious for the charming spirits. This was the same for their sacred spring school, so they wanted to recruit him. Chapter 1193. Xueqi. In the end, Xueqi was still someone who had experienced countless waves. She took a deep breath and answered with an elegant smile on her face. I do not deny your claim. Many lineages in the heaven spirit world desire an imperial bloodline like yours. It has always been a custom for sects to pay attention to these bloodlines. The sect masters all have a responsibility to find excellent bloodlines for their section. You are very eloquent. Li Qie smiled and asked, the old geezer from Void Imperfection wants me to stay and now you do as well. Aren't your 3 schools afraid of an inner conflict? She smiled, her mature and noble appearance made people palpitate from excitement. Young noble, you are misunderstanding something. Our 3 schools are one and the same. The Void Imperfection schoolmaster wants to keep you behind, as do we. This is only giving young noble more choices. It is not a competition. Li Qie chuckled with his eyes closed. If you have talked with the old geezer, you should know that I am not interested in this matter. We want you to stay, but this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to become our groom. You can just stay at our schools for a while if you like. Her demeanor was calm and gentle. Maybe we should approach this differently. In my eyes, your inner physique is quite powerful, so our schools are the best choice for you. We will have a suitable physique law for you to choose. Xueqi was not just boasting. In the heaven spirit world or even all of the 9 worlds, no other lineage had as many physique laws as the 3 schools since they had 3 different immortal physiques. Physique laws. Li Qie opened his eyes to look at her and smiled. You have good eyesight, but as for physique laws... He burst out into laughter at this point. She didn't become angry, for elegance exuded from her core. She spoke softly. May I ask for the reason behind your laughter? Of course, she wasn't aware that no one had more physique laws than Li Qie in this world. He simply had them all. Nothing. Li Qie replied with a grin. Your 3 schools have many physique laws. Not to mention the others, just the 3 immortal physique laws alone are truly precious. The Void Imperfection Windchase Law, the Evil Devourer Graceful Law, and the Surging Golden Spring Law. These 3 laws can be considered peerless in this world. With a brief pause, he continued. Outside of the physique laws created by immortal emperors, your 3 laws are quite rare. This is especially true for the Void Imperfection Windchase Law. It is infinitely close to perfection. This level of physique law is very rare. For example, the physique law from the soaring immortal sect of Immortal Emperor Fei could be considered another. It was truly difficult to receive such high praise from Li Qie. After all, he had the physique scripture that contained all the perfect and profound laws in existence. In fact, for cultivators, creating a physique law was even more difficult than creating an emperor law. This was one of the reasons why grand completion immortal physique users could assail immortal emperors. The scale of difficulty soared when it came to immortal physique laws. There were quite a few wonderful masters who were able to create these laws, but they had defects and were incomplete. There weren't that many at a level that could be considered complete, let alone perfect. The physique laws of the 3 schools were considered complete. Of course, there was still a large way to go before true perfection. It is thanks to our predecessors' achievements, we descendants have not been able to do anything, so we need to work even harder. She answered in a demure manner without pride. Li Qie looked at her and smiled. Your eyesight is not bad, since it can see that my inner physique is powerful. The temptation of physique laws might work for everyone else in this world, but it is nothing to me. For cultivators with powerful inner physiques, to be able to cultivate an immortal physique would be their greatest pursuit in life. They would find it impossible to refuse such a temptation. However, he promptly added, however, your Void Imperfection 3 schools does have something that tempts me. What might that be? She became curious as well. Since Li Qie wasn't interested in immortal physique laws, was there anything else in this world that was even more precious to pique his interest? He emphatically replied, your immortal Emperor Wu Go's creation, the Wind Chase Break. Despite her normal calm demeanor, his answer shocked her. The Wind Chase Break. One of the immortal physique strikes. Immortal physique strikes were mysterious techniques that very few people had seen. Legend states that only grand completion immortal physique emperors were able to create these attacks. Without reaching grand completion, even an immortal emperor wouldn't be able to do so. Conversely, grand completion users wouldn't be able to create them without having the heaven's will. Because of these strict requirements, these attacks were extremely rare. Furthermore, future generations speculated that there was an additional requirement, that the emperor's physique law must be self-made. Only those who had created their own physique laws to become an emperor with a grand completion immortal physique would be able to develop these attacks. There were many stories about these attacks themselves. Some said that they were more powerful than heaven's will secret laws. However, the opposition stated that these attacks couldn't oppose a secret law if its user had the heaven's will. Another group speculated that a grand completion user training in these attacks could definitely ambush an immortal emperor. They could even contend against the emperor's secret law. Alas, these were all guesses because there were too few immortal physique laws in this world and even fewer immortal physique strikes. A grand completion user with these attacks was 100 times rarer than an immortal emperor. As such, no one was able to witness such a duel, especially those from the younger generations. Xueqi was trembling after hearing this. After all, the Wind Chase Strike was once the most powerful and frightening technique from her 3 schools. A Void Imperfection user with the Wind Chase Strike held unimaginable power. However, you lot have lost the Wind Chase Strike. Li Qiye insipidly stated. This is very regrettable and is also the reason why the Void Imperfection 3 schools lost some of its deterring influence. Zhua Jianshi pondered in silence for a moment. Across the generations, this had been a truly regrettable matter for their school. In fact, they had tried to look for it all this time to no avail. She eventually calmed down and took a deep breath to look at Li Qiye. Our schools have many disciples training in different types of physiques, including saint and immortal physiques. I know what you are trying to say. Li Qiye smiled and interrupted her. An imperial bloodline combining with an immortal physique bloodline would make a perfect combination. If the offspring could inherit both legacies, then they might be able to surpass the old immortal emperor Yan Shi if they were to become an immortal emperor. This is a great temptation for any lineage. Li Qiye continued. However, I have never thought about spreading my bloodline to the 9 worlds. Even if I were to do so, the woman must be worthy of my entrustment. May I ask what kind of woman would be worthy of young noble Li's entrustment? She looked at him with eyes as soft as water and directly met his gaze. Li Qiye was still lying on the sea. He laughed and answered, if you come have some intimate fun with me for a while, I may consider. Such words changed her expression. They were direct and assailed her with obscenity. It was no longer teasing. This was the most straightforward call for sex. Ultimately, she was still a schoolmaster. This direct invitation to mate was provocative to the point of being humiliating. Young noble Li must be joking. She regained her composure and demure appearance to say, I am a married woman. Your request is too much of an imposition. I know. Li Qiye looked at her and said, I understand the meaning of the white flower on your chest. I didn't really want to reveal your scar, but I can let you know that I don't mind you being a widow. Plus, you are still a maiden. The lady, despite her experience, couldn't stay calm while handling this type of provocative conversation. After all, the topic was too much. Forget it, I was just kidding. Li Qiye flatly added. But remember, in order to get something, one must pay for it. Without an ace, you better think carefully before doing anything. Are you all worthy of my favor? Such words were quite domineering. If it was someone else, they would want nothing more than to be the groom of the 3 schools. Zhua Jianshi turned quiet again in the face of this dilemma. Her schools could indeed propose some very tempting conditions. However, Li Qiye was dismissive of them all. Chapter 1194. Mythical divine weapon. She eventually composed herself and looked at Li Qiye to say, perhaps you are interested in the great maelstrom. We may be of assistance in this respect. After hearing this, Li Qiye opened his eyes wide. A glint shot out from within while he stared at her intensely. She didn't know why, but the glint that flashed from his eyes frightened her in an indescribable manner. She felt like an ancient beast was awakening. However, she met his gaze head-on for a long time without fear because she had no malicious intent in the first place. It seems like you have seen a few things. Li Qiye slowly said, still fixated on her. I wouldn't dare to hide it from you. I was at the Abyss Sea that day, but it was still quite far away from the maelstrom. I only caught a glance. She nonchalantly said. However, I didn't expect this coincidence, for you to have an imperial bloodline. Perhaps this is a type of fate. Fate. Li Qiye only smiled and closed his eyes without caring too much. If you wish to venture into the maelstrom in the future, our 3 schools can help you. After all, we are part of the ancient charming spirit race. We have things other lineages lack. Li Qiye laughed while looking at her. Little beauty. She couldn't help but ask. Young noble, why are you laughing? If I have said something wrong, please point it out. She was negotiating with great sincerity. You have no idea. Li Qiye shook his head and replied. You think that I am trying to go into the maelstrom, but the truth is that I want nothing from it. He had already obtained the life origination he wanted and didn't care about the other things in there. Even if it had a few heaven-shattering secrets and incredible treasures, they still had nothing to do with him. Others were free to covet these treasures all they want. Zhua Jianshi found this surprising. On that day, she saw him entering the maelstrom, so she thought he had some ideas about it. You are mistaken about this matter. The maelstrom is meaningless to me. On the other hand, you charming spirits should pay more attention to it. She shuddered internally and immediately asked, What do you mean? Li Qiye slightly raised his brow. Don't play this mind game in front of me or I'll rip off your clothes. If you are one of the schoolmasters from Void Imperfection, you should know a little about this. Her heart sank a bit. Of course, it was not because of Li Qia's threat of tearing off her clothes. It was because she had heard some legends before. There were records within the sect, but they were too vague for her to learn anything substantial. She sincerely asked while looking at him, "I am not trying to conceal anything. The records left behind are only legends, making it quite difficult to tell whether they are accurate or not. Since you dare to enter the maelstrom, I'm sure you know more. Would you be willing to enlighten me?" He looked at her for a moment before answering. "Even if I say more, you won't necessarily be able to distinguish its validity. I can only say that if one day something actually happens to the maelstrom, it will be a catastrophe for the entire heaven spirit world, especially for charming spirits." She curiously asked, "What kind of catastrophe?" "That depends on the things in there. One accident will bring about a disaster, so when that day comes, run for your life. Flee from the heaven spirit world. The farther the better." He smiled and added, "Of course that day might also never come." She quietly contemplated after hearing this. The maelstrom had always been a mystery, but ever since a very distant era the charming spirits had been wary of it. Is it true that there are supreme items within the maelstrom? She had to ask the question that was lingering in her mind because there were too many different versions of this legend. "Yes, truly supreme treasures," he answered, "but it also depends on what you have in mind. If you are thinking about weapons, then yes, they are indeed there." "How do we obtain those weapons then?" She couldn't help but ask. "How do they compare to the sea demon's trident?" Li Qia laughed and said, "Do you know the origin of the trident? Or of its true power?" She answered, "It is the supreme divine artifact of the sea demons. Those who are accepted by the trident can become the sea god. Its power is boundless and invincible in myriad realms and even more formidable than an immortal emperor true treasure." Sea demons were similar to Trey ants. Their strongest existences were not immortal emperors. Their equivalent to tree fathers were called sea gods. However, these unrivaled existences must be recognized by the trident. After meeting this requirement, they would become a sea god capable of wielding the artifact. Historically, these supremes of the sea demons wielding the trident could put up a good fight against an immortal emperor with a true treasure. What you know is only superficial drizzle, but there's no need to elaborate on this. Even if there are divine weapons comparable to the trident in there, who among your race can wield such artifacts? With that, he finished, charming spirits should continue to pursue the path towards a mortal emperor. This is the correct way. The others are only alternative methods for when there is no other choice. Having said that, he closed his eyes again and gently waved his sleeve. "Okay, now don't bother me again." Xueqi sighed and stood up then bowed. "Our doors will always be open to you. Come visit us any time." Li Qia seemed to have fallen asleep at this moment. It was impossible to know if he actually heard her or not. She stopped bothering him and gently rode the waves away before disappearing completely. She was not offended by this meeting and only felt disappointment instead. This trip was essentially meaningless. In the end, she understood that her schools didn't interest him at all. Li Qia was still lying quietly on the sea and drifted with the flow. This process continued for a while. Eventually, he suddenly opened his eyes and drilled into the sea. A moment later, a huge trench appeared before him. This was a small part of the bottomless trench distant from the previous sea region. Li Qia entered the trench in one go. In this split second, he released his divine intent to sweep through this area. Nothing could escape from his sense. Eventually, he stood before a particular cliff inside the trench. There was a depression with a clam the size of a basin that occasionally spat out bubbles. It looked quite ordinary. The only thing worth noticing was the pearl within it, emitting a faint light. Li Qia smiled upon the sight of the clam and the pearl. It really isn't easy to find this pathfinder clam. Only by following the current of the ocean would one be able to eventually find this clam and the correct path. Li Qia was drifting with the sea in order to catch this type of clam. Of course, there were countless clams in the Jade Sea and the bottomless trench. One could find as many as they wanted. However, very few clams were capable of pathfinding. In the past, he had searched and caught many clams before finally learning the mysteries within and understanding their usage. With the successful capture, he identified the correct direction and headed back to Shallow Beach. His trip here was to find two things in order to replenish the life of the peacock tree. One of them was the void imperfection spring inside the ancestral whale, while the other was hidden in another secret location. This was precisely why he needed this Pathfinder clam. He needed it to find the second well-concealed item, since a thoughtless search would yield no results. Chapter 1195. Teeming Sea Tribe. In recent days, Shallow Beach had become quite lively. Many lineages and cultivators from the Jade Sea came here. Even those from the Profound and Dragon Demon Seas came as well. They came for the precious needlefish. In the Heaven Spirit World, these fish were used for both food and medicines due to its nutritious properties. They lived in the bottomless trench, so it was difficult to find them normally. Even those who entered the trench might not see them. Only in the season of coral blossoming would these fish come out of the trench to eat the pollen. The best time to catch them was when the flocks came. Because of this, many people ran to Shallow Beach and waited for this season to come. Despite the number of people, there weren't any powerful cultivators here. The majority of them were only disciples of the third generation. In just a moment, everyone quickly retreated, with not one daring to block these fish any longer. He, this is our teeming tribe's domination, got it? The leading fish looked around with an imposing momentum. The crowd was moved by the bullish behavior from this tribe, but they didn't dare to say anything. No one really wanted to provoke the teeming sea tribe. This was a great tribe among the sea demons, especially in the Jade Sea. Some even said that the teeming sea tribe was the most populous demon race in the Heaven Spirit World. Even though they were sea demons, they weren't welcomed by the other sea demons. On the contrary, they were considered a low-level race or even a wretched race. The truth was not far from this. Despite their vast population, the teeming sea tribe consisted of low-level demons that couldn't get rid of their true appearance. They needed a very long time to cultivate into a human form. Their humanoid members were all powerful existences and part of the royal clans. They might be weaker than the other sea demons, but in their own way, they were also the most fearsome because of their unimaginable numbers. It could be said that their numbers rivaled the rest of the fish in the Heaven Spirit World. There was a phrase in this world: any place with water would have the teeming sea tribe. Just this belief alone was indicative of their massive hordes. Their reproductive capabilities could only be described with the word madness. There was no way to kill all of them. In the long years, their lairs had been attacked several times. However, they rose time after time by reproducing. Ultimately, the Saxon tribes that had destroyed the teeming sea tribe were wiped out by them. This was the scariest aspect of this weak tribe. It was impossible to kill them all. Chapter 1196. Eating dragon tendon. After seeing the quick meal they made out of the cultivator, a lot of people were frozen stiff and didn't dare to block their way. The 1,000 fish became even more emboldened by the silent crowd. They arrogantly trod forward on a rampage without any hesitation. However, they didn't get far before having to stop because someone was taking a stroll on the street. The other pedestrians had all ran away long ago, so the path was fairly empty. But now, a single youth was standing there, so he seemed especially conspicuous with no intention of backing off. Moreover, this person was a human, so it seemed even more out of place. The biggest fish snapped. "Brat, are you blind? You dare to block our path?" The spectators on both sides of the streets were sweating for the human youth. This boy must not know how terrifying the teeming sea tribe was. Of course, it was Xueqi walking down the street. He didn't bat an eyelash since he didn't care for this fish at all. The fish leader was furious after being shown such disdain by a human boy. It yelled, "Brat, you ignore the accepting heavens and barge into the unwelcoming hell. My children, feast on him until there is not a single pulp left." A different fish added with an evil tone, "Hey boy, we like to eat human flesh the most, so plump and fresh." Crackle! The spurs on the 1,000 fishes' heads began to channel lightning that was then shot right at Xueqi. The spectators nearby couldn't bear to watch any longer. They could already see Xueqi being torn into pieces in an instant. Pop! The powerful lightning bolt struck his body, but there wasn't even a tiny spark. It seemed to be completely absorbed by him. Keep in mind that even the lightning pawn from a tribulation couldn't do anything to him. His ancient void rune could absorb all tribulations in this world, so this tiny lightning bolt was nothing to him. The vicious fish were all shocked to see the attack have no effect. During their daze, Xueqi pointed his finger forward. Next, one could hear a thunderous crackle. Extremely powerful lightning burst from the tip of his finger like a brilliant sun. Clusters of lightning suddenly surged wildly in an unstoppable manner. Fiery sparks sprang up as the lightning clusters swept by with an indescribable speed. Time seemed to stop for a moment. Next, the sounds of bodies falling echoed as more than 1,000 fish dropped to the street. The only fish standing was the biggest one. After seeing his children fall down, he knew he had hit a steel wall and didn't dare to think too much before turning around to escape. However, he couldn't take 2 steps before Xueqi had him gripped by the jaw. He couldn't move at all. Despite being restrained, the fish was still as arrogant as before and shouted, "Boy, let me go right this instant. I am a vanguard of the teeming marquis. If you so much as touch a scale of mine, the army of millions under him will tear you to shreds. They will even uproot you humans from the heaven spirit world altogether." Teeming marquis? Xueqi smiled and said, "I've never heard of him. Not to mention this insignificant fish marquis. Even your entire race is less than an ant in my eyes." After hearing such disdainful words, the fish immediately cried out, "Little animal, you dare to shame our race? There will be no peace for you humans in the heaven spirit world." Xueqi simply smiled and pointed his finger again. With a buzz, the fish's entire body split into thin and neat fillets. At this time, a very magical scene happened. Every inch of the fish's meat was separated. Its intestines and internal organs were also removed along with all the meat. Eventually, only the fish bones remained. On the backbone of the skeleton was a glittering jade-like tendon just like the tendon of a dragon. What was even more incredible was how the pieces of the fish were jumping as if they were still alive. After Xueqi tore out the tendon, all of the pieces finally screamed and stopped jumping, becoming devoid of life. This translucent fish tendon in Xueqi's hand emitted a beautiful light, as if it was full of life force. Xueqi threw it into his mouth and carefully chewed a bit before swallowing. Then he flatly said, "Though it is not a real dragon tendon, it is still quite delicious. Now I'm just missing some sauce." The crowd was stunned after seeing this. Xueqi dared to say such things after eating the fish tendon. Xueqi glanced at the 1,000 fish on the ground and said, "Well, that's another dish for today. It has been a while since I've eaten a dragon tendon of the teeming sea tribe." He swept his sleeve forward and stored all of them into his spatial pouch before entering the inn in front of him. The crowd was still looking at him as he disappeared into the inn. After a while, one person calmed down and swallowed their saliva before whispering, I heard that the dragon tendon of the teeming tribe is very delicious, but I have never eaten it before." His friend next to him immediately warned him, "Are you insane? If the teeming tribe heard those words, they will exterminate your family." The teeming sea tribe had a straight spine with their muscles surrounding it. They called this part the dragon tendon, and this was their most important body part. Without the dragon tendon, they wouldn't be able to survive. However, it was rumored that this tendon was a special delicacy, one of the most delicious dishes in the sea. Alas, ordinary people wouldn't dare to eat these dragon tendons because once the teeming tribe found out, it would bring about their merciless, wrathful vengeance. It could even result in the complete annihilation of their race. Only top-level experts such as invincible god kings, immortal emperors, tree fathers and sea gods would dare to openly eat dragon tendons. Of course, the teeming tribe wouldn't dare to do anything against these top-level experts and had to pretend as if nothing had happened. In the heaven spirit world, some people said that sea gods and tree fathers had all eaten dragon tendons before. No one really knew if this was true or not. Xueqi stepped into the inn with the whirlpool again. It was the one opened by Yi Tu's senior uncle. The boss here enthusiastically greeted him because of the school's command. In their territories, they must do their best to treat Xueqi well. "Boss, give me a good root of turmeric and some fermented bean paste." Xueqi sat down and swung his sleeve. All the vicious fish fell to the ground. The boss and customers were astounded to see the mountain-like heap of fish before them. Teeming fish. The boss's expression changed along with many of the guests. In spite of this, the boss didn't do anything and immediately brought some turmeric and aged sauce over for Xueqi. Despite being struck by his lightning, these fish were not dead. They were only limp on the ground and couldn't move at all. After preparing the turmeric and paste, Xueqi casually picked up one of the fish. With a silver knife in his left hand, he cut into the fish's back to reveal the dragon tendon. With a pair of chopsticks in the other hand, he swiftly pulled out the tendon. Ah! The fish screamed and died immediately after its tendon was taken. Li Qie dipped the tendon into the sauce and carefully chewed while nodding his head approvingly. This is the taste, one of the seafood delicacies in the heaven spirit world. After he finished, he grabbed another fish. His hands were as smooth as flowing water as they instantly removed the dragon tendon and dipped it into the sauce before putting it into his mouth. Everything seemed so coordinated and perfect. He was enjoying this just like an emperor savoring his meal. The guests were slack-jawed from this scene. This was far too domineering. Daring to eat dragon tendons in public. This was simply provoking the entire teeming sea tribe, the millions and millions of teeming fish in the heaven spirit world. In the present day, only the top-level experts would dare to eat these tendons out in the open. Of course, some weaker experts couldn't help but catch them and eat them as well, but they didn't dare to do so publicly. However, this human boy didn't care for any of this. This was the most overbearing and arrogant display of a feast. Ah! Another scream resounded as Li Qie repeated his delicious procedure. A Dao attendant stood up and warned him, "Fellow Daoist, your actions are too brutal. It is too much to eat dragon tendons before everyone like this." Chapter 1197. Dao Attendant Lin. This Dao attendant was situated in a corner near a window. There were some other cultivators sitting with him that seemed to be moon-gazing. When the Dao attendant called Li Qie out, these cultivators looked at him with unfriendly gazes as well. The guests in the inn held their breaths after seeing this. Some even moved further back lest they get involved in this mess. Many of the guests recognized this attendant. It was Dao Attendant Lin, the servant of Daoist Lin from the Immaculate Expanse. Not to mention this attendant's powerful backing, this young man ahead surely wasn't a nice person either, since he dared to eat dragon tendons publicly. At the very least, he must be very fierce. Moreover, this involved the teeming sea tribe, and no one with a sense of self-preservation wanted to deal with them. Li Qie chewed another dragon tendon, then gulped it down before slowly turning towards the attendant. "Immaculate Expanse, right? Your progenitor also ate dragon tendons." He swallowed millions of tendons in one gulp. It is no big deal. Dao Attendant Lin wanted to question Li Qie because the Immaculate Expanse had some friendship with the teeming sea tribe. After all, this tribe numbered in the billions, so it made sense that it had some relationships with the sects in this world. However, he didn't expect such a response from Li Qie. In the heaven spirit world, the majority of the top-level experts had all eaten dragon tendons before. After all, they were a type of delicacy. Even though he didn't know if his progenitor had eaten them or not, he didn't dare to deny this claim. Well, it is not the same in this case. He struggled to blurt out a reply. Li Qie took out another tendon and chewed on it carefully before lazily speaking. "Oh? Not the same? How is it not similar? Do tell. Is it because your progenitor used fire to broil them instead? Then I would really be disappointed. That is like steaming a good pear. The best and most delicious way to eat dragon tendon is with turmeric and aged seasoning. Back then, when immortal Emperor Wu Go was young, he used this very type of seasoning and ate tens of millions of dragon tendons. The teeming fish were so scared that they ran to the bottom of the sea and didn't dare to come out for a period of time. This became a well-known legend. As for your Immaculate Expanse progenitor, who knows what he did back then?" Li Qie ate one more tendon at this point. He seemed to be quite pleased with this feast. In fact, many spectators were quietly swallowing their own saliva, but they didn't dare to join in. This delicious meal was no secret in the heaven spirit world. Everyone knew that the teeming fish were the most vicious and numerous. However, few people dared to say that their tendons were also extremely delicious. Li Qie truly made many people hungry, but no one wanted to incite the anger of the teeming tribe. His words also silenced Dao Attendant Lin and shocked the inn's boss as well. He suddenly involved the Void Imperfection School. After all, this was no longer immortal Emperor Wu Go's generation. His school also didn't want to provoke this fish tribe even if they were stronger. The real problem was that there were too many of them. "You." Dao Attendant Lin couldn't retort. He struggled to say, "You are eating dragon tendons before all of us. This is a very cruel and evil display. The teeming tribe is part of the sea demons, a great race in the heaven spirit world. You are eating living cultivators, an extremely vicious path far from the Tao." "Extremely vicious and straying away from the Tao?" Li Qie laughed in response. "If you are saying that I am vicious, then I will accept it. However, if this is because of me eating dragon tendons, then my teeth are about to fall out from laughter. Teeming tribe? They're nothing special, merely living creatures no different from beasts. Not to mention that I am a human, even the sea demons in this world do not consider them to be cultivators. He carefully chewed on more tendons before leisurely continuing. Don't think so highly of yourself. In their eyes, you cultivators are no different from food. They have eaten countless cultivators and mortals, so me eating them today is part of the natural order. At this point, he coldly glared at the boy. When you eat meat, do you consider yourself to be cruel as well? You. The attendant was speechless once again. Because of some ties with the teeming prince, he wanted to speak up for the teeming tribe, but he didn't expect to be left tongue-tied by Li Qia's swift rhetoric. The guests didn't dare to openly praise Li Qia's response despite agreeing in their minds. The teeming tribe being cruel was not anything new. Their enemies would eventually be eaten until there was nothing left. Countless cultivation sects had been destroyed and innumerable mortals had been devoured. Alas, the angry cultivators and lineages were apprehensive of them and didn't dare to speak up. Li Qie today said many things that resonated with the crowd, so they cheered him on in their minds. Li Qie stopped paying attention to Dao attendant Lin and got bored after eating for a while. He immediately burned all of the fish and stood up to leave. The Dao attendant snorted while watching his departing back. The youth didn't expect to be humiliated like this. He had a hard time swallowing this anger. His master was Daoist Lin, the leader of the Immaculate Expanse. As his master's confidant, he was respected everywhere he went while basking in the spotlight. But today, this human junior didn't spare him any face at all in front of the crowd. He absolutely wouldn't let go of this grievance. After refining the necessary items, he left Shallow Beach and headed for the coral forest. Many cultivators were already here, waiting. They came from all corners of the oceans for the needlefish. Some were riding huge ships on the ocean while others were controlling swift shuttles. There were also those who rode sea turtles or gigantic whales. It was a colorful and diverse scene. These people had occupied some places at the coral forest, such as the hills. Many began to place traps around the coral trees just to wait for the needlefish. Fortunately, the forest was vast, so for the time being there was no fighting for spots. Li Qie found Yi Tu and Teng Jiwen. The two of them had caught many insects for Li Qie, and already ground them to dust in accordance to his instructions. He found an open place and casually took a lap around to pick a spot before ordering the two boys. Sprinkle this dust over the forest, do it all over the trees and ground. The two immediately followed his command. Meanwhile, Li Qie placed his refined materials onto the ground. He wanted to refine something else here. It was an item that resembled a fish hook with a very long string. This overly long string actually covered the fish hook completely. When Li Qie was ready and the two had sprayed the insect powder everywhere, Yi Tu asked with curiosity, "Young noble, what are you trying to do?" To which Li Qie responded while calmly sitting on the highest position in this location. "Fishing." He asked, "Fishing? Fishing for the needlefish?" However, he immediately felt that this wasn't right. Li Qie had said that he didn't care for the needlefish. He changed his question. "Is there something else besides the needlefish?" He was the supervisor of Shallow Beach and was very familiar with this area. Outside of the blossoming coral teas leading out the precious needlefish, the other marine creatures here were not worth fighting over. Li Qie replied with a smile. "Yes, there is a devil shark, but you haven't seen it before." Devil shark. Yi Tu carefully thought about it, but he had never heard of such a fish in this neighborhood. Teng Jiwen was a bit more knowledgeable than Yi Tuesday. He recalled a legend after hearing Li Qie and spoke with surprise. "The archdevil armored shark?" "Indeed, that's it," Li Qie said. "I want to catch it, otherwise I wouldn't have gone to these lengths to prepare." "Archdevil armored shark?" Yi Tu asked Teng Jiwen. "What kind of fish is it?" Teng Jiwen shook his head. "I am not clear on the specifics. I only heard that it is an extremely vicious creature. It's also quite powerful as well. Legend states that it appeared in the bottomless trench, but no one has spotted it before." With that, he became a bit worried and asked, "People say that it is extremely strong, can we actually handle it?" "Not us." Li Qie shook his head. "Just me. Stand to the side and watch to avoid accidents, or I won't be able to explain it to your sections." Chapter 1198. Lively Coral Forest. Both Yi Tu and Tang Jiwen didn't oppose or support his decision. Li Chia looked around the area a bit to make sure everything was ready before telling the two. Okay, the two of you should change as well. Transform and conceal your identities. It's up to you. Transform. Ting Jiwen was surprised. After all, he was the descendant of the Heaven Vine Citadel. His conduct was open and straightforward. There was no need to hide or do anything in secret. Li Chia smiled and said, "There will be disputes when benefits are up for grabs. Conflicts are inevitable, so when one of you happens to be from the Void Imperfection School and the other from the Heaven Vine Citadel, it will have a negative influence if you two follow me around killing." Yi Tu quickly said, "Young noble, rest assured, the schoolmaster told me to guide you and be a good host. If anything happens in our territory, we will maneuver all three schools." This was not an exaggeration or a careless statement. There were very few things that the three schools couldn't handle due to their sheer strength. Tang Jiwen supported him as well. "Yi Tu is right. Your enemy is our citadel's enemy. We will always tread together with you." The Sunflower forefather had instructed him earlier. This type of little trouble didn't matter to their citadel, so they naturally wanted to take on some risk for Li Chia. "The two of you are mistaken." Li Chia shook his head and smiled. "That isn't what I meant. Not wanting to cause trouble for the two of you is only a small part of the reason. The truth is that I don't want you to block my way." "Block your way?" The two of them were a bit confused after hearing this. Li Chia explained, "With you two and your sex, who would dare to come and provoke me? How can I find a reason to kill then?" Such words astounded the two. It was as if the guy was overzealous in his quest to become a mass murderer. "There's no need to overthink things." Li Chia chuckled. "I love trouble, especially those who come to chase me. The more the better, so I can have a baptism of blood. This is the only thing that makes me feel alive and gets my blood boiling." With that, a glimmer of amusement flashed deep in his eyes. He could imagine this day play out already. The two of them glanced at each other. For some reason, Li Chia's smile creeped them out. It was like a beast showing a kind smile to a little rabbit. Anyone would be scared after seeing this smile. This had a greater effect on Tang Jiwen. He remembered when Li Chia didn't care for anything back at the Heaven Vine Citadel. He held the ancestors in disdain and ignored absolutely everything. Just imagining the possible massacre back at the Citadel left him shuddering. He could smell a sanguine stench right now. There was a faint scene of carnage with mountains of flesh and rivers of blood. The two of them quickly hid their true identities and turned into ordinary attendants before standing next to Li Chia. Li Chia sat down in a meditative pose inside the coral forest and slowly closed his eyes as if he was hibernating. He was not the only one to occupy an area here at the coral forest. Many people had occupied their own locations and drawn circles around their chosen zones to warn others. In a few short days, the vast coral forest became quite crowded. The latecomers didn't have any spots, so conflicts became inevitable. In this enclosed situation, those who came from powerful sects or were personally strong were at a great advantage. No one dared to compete with them for the hills. Even if they came later, they could easily seize others' territories. Thus, the place became particularly lively in a short amount of time. All kinds of cultivators from all the races appeared in the forest to wait for the flowers to blossom. Battles and robberies were common everyday occurrences. Many cultivators had yet to see the blossoming coral flowers before they fell in these struggles. Yen Yonglong came as well during this waiting period. He came by himself. The places he stepped on were illuminated by sunlight. After walking around the coral forest, he chose a hill near the bottomless trench. The problem was that some other cultivators had already claimed it. He stood above them while sweeping over them with his eyes and told these cultivators, "This place is mine. Will you leave by your own volition or will I have to resort to force?" The people who occupied this land didn't want to fight against Yen Yonglong, so they packed their items and handed this hill over to him. No one would laugh at them for conceding in this fashion. Yen Yonglong was a disciple of the extreme Yang monarch. This meant that he had enough strength to look down on them. Which minor sect or vagrant cultivator was willing to mess with the monarch's disciple? Not long after this event, Gong Sun Qianer arrived as well. Her entourage was much bigger than Yen Yonglong's. Her followers were all powerful. Their group, under her lead, was quite bullish. Everyone had to make way for them. No one dared to say a word about her aggressive attitude. Even though she was only a maid, they didn't look down on her status and strength. Her master was a concubine of the profound god monarch. This was a young character known by all in the heaven spirit world. He came from Gu Chun's 4 branches and had already become a god monarch. It could be said that he was invincible among the younger generation. In terms of status and power, Yan Yonglong was not necessarily higher than Gong Sun Qianer at all. She took fancy to a bay close to the trench due to its excellent location. It had changed masters several times, so the current cultivator occupying it wasn't friendly at all. He also came from a big sect and had just killed the last person who occupied this location. She glanced over and told this cultivator, "Scram, this place is mine." However, he didn't leave. He came from a big sect that was also quite famous at the Jade Sea. If he was to scram after she told him so, how could he have any face left? He replied with a cold expression. "You are too overbearing, I have already occupied this place." She declared in a domineering manner. "I'll make you scram then." She had a high status back at the Profound Sea Dynasty, one of the 4 branches, so she didn't care for a young cultivator of the same generation as her. This cultivator stood up and sneered. "Fine, let me see the great techniques of the Profound Sea Dynasty. I hope you have at least learned a little from them." The followers next to her scowled and wanted to teach this guy a lesson. However, she stopped them and revealed a cold smile. Such impudent words, worthy of death. The phoenix hairpin in her hair flew out before she finished speaking. It was violet in color and turned into a purple ray that moved at an indiscernible speed. It would pierce through people's forehead before they could react. This cultivator was also strong and had great reaction speed. With a changed expression, he formed a mudra to stop the hairpin. Pluff! Blood slowly spilled. The cultivator's eyes were wide open as he fell down. It was useless even if he was faster. His mudra couldn't stop this hairpin. Not only did it penetrate his mudra, it also went straight through his forehead. It was a fatal blow. She recalled her hairpin and coldly spat out. "Just an ant." This hairpin was a treasure bestowed by the Profound Sea God Monarch. It was quite powerful, so ordinary cultivators couldn't stop its lethal might. The crowd was astonished by this and didn't dare to say a word or come closer. Back at Shallow Beach, she would have scruples about killing people due to it being under the jurisdiction of the Void Imperfection School. However, in this coral forest, she could kill whoever she wanted. Many people were unwilling to near her in order to avoid getting killed. Li Chia's hill was quite far from the bottomless trench. Very few people would care about his location, so it was a quiet stay for him. Of course, he wasn't here for the needlefish, so he didn't need to pick a place too close to the bottomless trench. He was sitting here with his eyes closed as if he was sleeping. Not long after Yan Yonglong and Gong Sun Qianer got here, Dao attendant Lin came as well. He also took a lap around the forest before stopping at Li Chia's hill. A bit courageous. In a world dominated by the 3 great races, a human actually dares to occupy a mountain by himself. He stopped and coldly stared at Li Chia. Back at the inn, he had been completely humiliated by Li Chia. If they weren't at Shallow Beach, he would have taught the fool a lesson already. Chapter 1199. Needlefish. Li Chia turned a deaf ear to the attendant's taunt. He remained there in his meditative pose and simply ignored the attendant. Such an arrogant display enraged the attendant once again. He snorted and said, "Ignorant junior, and arrogant as well. I'm afraid you will die without a burial not long from now." Some cultivators noticed this from the distance. Humans were quite rare in the heaven spirit world, but this youth was arrogant enough. Not long ago, he opposed the teeming sea tribe and now, he was looking down on Dao attendant Lin. From this, he offended 2 big lineages in the Jade Sea right away. Just what was this human boy's background? Li Chia finally opened his eyes and revealed a smile. "Come if you dare, your uncle will crush you with one hand. If you are afraid, then get the hell out of here, don't disturb my peace." The attendant's expression quickly shifted as a murderous glint flashed across his pupils. However, he restrained himself from taking action. The crowd became even more confused about this human junior who was spouting such overbearing words. Everyone thought that the attendant would attack right away to kill Li Chia. However, the attendant took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. He gave a cruel smile and sneered, "Ignorant brat, it is not difficult for me to take your dog life. However, The teeming marquis has declared that he wants to personally take your life and let you experience a fate worse than death. Just wait, at that time, you will regret having been born into this world. Maybe you will even beg me to end your life then. Many people became afraid after hearing this. Someone murmured, "Teeming marquis, will there not be a single blade of grass left?" The teeming marquis was a royal member of the teeming sea tribe and one of its fierce generals. He had previously led an army of millions to eradicate several lineages. Rumor has it that wherever his army went, not even a single blade of grass would be left. They didn't only eat their enemies but also all vegetation. Anything with life would be completely chewed up. Not long ago, Xueqi had killed a group of teeming fish. These fish were the Marquis soldiers. The Marquis was famous for his brutality in the Jade Sea, so he was infuriated when someone publicly ate his soldiers and dragon tendons. Thus, he declared that he would make Xueqi suffer. Xueqi caught a quick glimpse of the attendant before slowly closing his eyes again. The attendant didn't pursue the matter. If it wasn't for the Marquis declaration, he would have taken this brat's head already. He snorted and left. Not long after, he selected a hill. The cultivator here saw that he wanted it and quickly gathered his stuff and handed over the land. This smart cultivator made the attendant's expression much better. His prestige was still there. Very few people in the forest would dare to provoke his authority. The sea creatures didn't dare to appear. Whether they be crabs or fish, all were hiding since they could sense the terrifying murderous intent from the large number of cultivators present. As the day of blossoming approached, the cultivators became more and more quiet in anticipation. They would take action the moment the needlefish came out and immediately retreat after catching the first batch. Eventually, the coral flowers were about to blossom. The entire forest turned silent like the calm before the storm. The little buds finally came out from these flowers. All of them had different colors in the center, making them resemble stars. Many beautiful flowers bloomed throughout the entire forest in a quiet yet spectacular manner. To see these flowers blooming at the same time was quite shocking and difficult to describe with words. In a short amount of time, the star-like buds of different colors made this entire area look like a magnificent galaxy, pulling at the spectators' heartstrings. Everyone held their breath since they didn't want to break this beautiful serenity while the millions of coral flowers blossomed. In this moment, many people felt that they were immersed in a sea of stars and became in touch with just how vast this world truly was. Eventually, all the flower buds finally came out. The pollen began to shed from the flower's core and drifted away with the current. Shortly after, this colorful pollen dyed everything with their shades. The entire area was gorgeous and spectacular. The crowd became even more nervous while gazing at the bottomless trench. They were all waiting for the needlefish to appear. Only Xueqi remained calm on his hill without even bothering to look at the trench. Crash! Finally, the sea current surged with waves. The coral forest's water began to move violently as well. They saw silver shadows rushing out from the trench. The moment these shadows appeared, a net was cast over the sky above the coral forest. Upon a closer inspection, these shadows were fish swimming for the coral flowers. This was the meaning behind their name. Each of them was as small as a needle and their eyes were even smaller than sesame seeds. Their speed was quite frightening, like a meteor flashing by. Because of this, when they rushed out, the net immediately blotted out the forest. Someone shouted after seeing them, "Needlefish!" The rest of the crowd got ready. Ah! However, someone screamed before anyone took action. A weak cultivator wanted to catch these fish, but he couldn't stop these fast creatures. When a big flock of them rushed over, they pierced him and turned him into a sieve in their quick frenzy. At this time, everyone else shouted and immediately maneuvered against these fish in order to catch them. The majority of cultivators came prepared. One took out a huge net and instantly covered many of the fish. This net was a great treasure, but he couldn't pull it back. He was stuck in the net as well and was pulled by the fish all the way down the bottomless trench. Gong Sun Chenner, Dao attendant Lin, and Yen Yonglong finally took action. They all came from imperial lineages, so they were quite powerful. They caught a large group of fish right away, unlike the other cultivators here. In this fashion, cultivators were busy catching these fish. However, more were still rushing out from the trench in an endless manner as if they wanted to crush this whole region. The ones that weren't caught crazily ate the pollen from the flowers. They were like rampaging winds. Wherever they went, the initially colorful seawater would turn clear again. It was quite a majestic scene. Lichie's location was quite far from the trench. Although some fish managed to break through the barricade, there weren't many of them that came to this place to eat. Lichie continued to ignore them by sitting there. Boom! While everyone was trying to catch these fish, the current became turbulent. A group of sea demons split the water to come to this place. This new group resembled an army more than a school of fish. Get out of the way! Scram! They came with an aggressive momentum. Anyone who stood in their path was instantly killed and their blood dyed the water red. Teeming fish. It is the Marquis. A cultivator screamed after seeing the army that consisted of tens of thousands of fish and quickly retreated. In a short moment, this army of sea demons completely surrounded Lichie's hill with several layers of fish. A chilling aura pervaded this region with the arrival of this demon army. Chapter 1200. Teeming Marquis. The atmosphere of the coral forest was strained to the extreme after being invaded by the mass of teeming fish. Even those who were catching needlefish stopped in their tracks. Many were frightened at the sight of the nearly 100,000 teeming fish surrounding the hills nearby. They quickly left this troubled location in order to stay safe. In terms of individual strength, these fish were not that strong. Many cultivators were confident in killing an ordinary fish in a one-on-one. However, their sheer numbers made them dreadful. Killing one teeming fish would be the same as provoking thousands or even hundreds of thousands of teeming fish. This was the most frightening matter. Someone is about to be very unlucky. A cultivator murmured after seeing the fish encircling Lichie. Lichie still didn't open his eyes despite being completely trapped. One person stepped out at this time. It was a teeming fish in full human form. In this great army, very few fish had a human form. Although a few of them were very strong, they still had characteristics of fish remaining. For example, some had 2 hands and a human head, but their body was still that of a fish. As for others, they only had a human's head. The majority of them were still in fish form. The humanoid expert wore armor and had an imposing demeanor. He emitted a powerful aura and a bloodthirsty glare. His entire being gave off the smell of blood as if he had bathed in it, resulting in a chilling air. Teeming Marquis. A person shuddered after seeing him. This was a noble of the teeming tribe. It was said that he had several 100,000 troops, and this number might have reached the millions mark. He was a marquis that recently rose to prominence in their tribe and was notorious for his cruelty. You are the brat that ate dragon tendons. He stared at Lichie with bloodthirst in his eyes. Lichie finally opened his eyes. However, he was not looking at the teeming marquis but at one particular needlefish. Although millions of these fish were trapped in this forest by cultivators, some still made it to this particular region and were crazily devouring the pollen in the water. This fish was not that much different from the others. If one had to point something out, it would be that this fish had a pair of feelers that others didn't. They were extremely small, one on each side, and were quite difficult to see even upon carefully scrutinizing it. The other needlefish were eating the pollen in the water, but this one was eating the insect powder that Yi Tu and Tang Jiwen ground and scattered on the ground. The Marquis was not happy at being scorned by Lichie, so his expression turned sour. He smiled cruelly. Ignorant brat, today, I will show you a fate worse than death. Lichie finally turned back to look at the Marquis and slowly said, Run now and I'll spare your dog life. Otherwise, I will massacre the entire teeming tribe in the future. The crowd was speechless after hearing this. People looked at each other and felt that this statement was too outrageous. Someone murmured, He's not afraid of biting his tongue while bragging at all. Over the millions of years, a few people had made this claim that they would destroy the teeming tribe. Some had even attacked their lairs, but in the end, they couldn't wipe out this race due to its great numbers. But now, this human junior was making this claim. This was simply not knowing the immensity of the heaven and earth and, in the eyes of the spectators, being too naive. Which hole did this kid come out from? He doesn't know how terrifying the teeming fish are. A cultivator shook his head. Good. The Marquis actually smiled instead of becoming angry. He turned back to the tens of thousands of fish behind him and shouted, My children, did you hear that? This little animal says he wants to destroy our tribe. Boisterous laughter immediately resounded. All the fish started laughing and felt that there couldn't be a better joke than this. Well, since this animal dares to make this claim, we don't need to be polite anymore. The Marquis smilingly said, "Children, it is time to eat. Remember, 1 bite per person, but don't kill him just yet. Peck his flesh but let him survive. I want to torture him." "Affirmative." All of the teeming fish shouted and immediately rushed towards Xueqi like hungry sharks. At this time, they didn't try to attack him with lightning. They wanted him to feel his flesh being torn apart so that he would suffer the agonizing pain. The Marquis exposed a cruel smile as his horde rushed towards Xueqi. In his mind, it would only take an instant for Xueqi to be eaten by his underlings until only his bones were left, letting him survive with only a single breath remaining. That would be when he would use the most vicious method to let this brat live on. His wails would echo across the entire region. The cultivators here couldn't bear to watch. They could already see the brutal scene and Xueqi's miserable end. However, some of them were gloating as well. They believed that this human junior was courting death. He chose to barge into hell instead of heading for heaven. Opposing the teeming fish would bring about a genocide. Mere ants wanting to commit suicide. Xueqi was too lazy to look at the fish, for his eyes were still fixated on that one needlefish. Right when all the fish rushed over and were about to attack Xueqi spread out his palm and coldly declared, "Die." A huge black hole emerged from his palm, engulfing all of the teeming fish like a tidal wave. The black hole twisted all the fish into fleshy suds before swallowing them whole. "Ah!" Screams shrieked left and right. Before the teeming fish knew what was happening, all of them were devoured by the black hole without even leaving behind a corpse. Myriad Tao Fist. Heaven Devourer Evil Fist. This was based on the Heaven Devourer Evil physique. The moment it came out, the fish were no different from moths flying towards a flame. It was an attack that resembled a shark capable of swallowing everything, while the teeming fish were only tiny prey barely enough to satiate the fist's appetite. This reversal shocked everyone, including the teeming Marquis. In the next second, his body was up in the air. Before the crowd could grasp the situation, Xueqi was gripping the Marquis by the neck. This only took a split second, so no one really saw it happen. Xueqi glared at the fish and chillingly uttered, "Just an ant that's barely at the heavenly sovereign level, yet you dare to prance around in front of me?" While spasming, the Marquis had difficulty speaking with his neck gripped. Eventually, he gasped for breath but didn't change his ferocious nature. He cried out, "Little animal, even if you kill me, my race will not spare you. Our billion-strong armies will tear you into pieces and eradicate your 10 clans." Countless people held their breaths while watching this scene. They knew that this was not just an exaggeration. The teeming race had established numerous countries in the vast oceans. What was even more scary was that they were quite unified. Killing one of their marquises would bring about revenge from these innumerable fish. The Marquis was not strong by himself, but behind him were hundreds of countries and billions of citizens. This was the scariest part. "I'll be waiting." Xueqi smiled and placed his palm on the Marquis' body. Pop! The Marquis let out a shrill scream. His cultivation was destroyed by Xueqi. Thus his true body was revealed. He was a gigantic fish. Xueqi's palm ran on the fish's body, stripping him into thin slices. In the blink of an eye, the skeleton of the fish appeared. One could still see a heart beating inside. Xueqi instantly ripped the dragon tendon from the fish's backbone, severing it of its life. He casually threw the tendon into his mouth and began chewing. He looked around at the other cultivators before swallowing and spoke. "If you see any teeming fish, let them know that I, Xueqi, do not like them. They better scram to the ends of the world to get away from me. Otherwise, not only will I tear them apart, I'll also eat their dragon tendons as an appetizer for my wine." Chapter 1201. Archdevil Armored Shark. Vicious and domineering. These were the 2 words that people found most appropriate to describe this human boy. Some were truly shaken and couldn't calm down after this spectacle. This was a blatant challenge to the teeming tribe. Just how overbearing was this? Not to mention a single cultivator, even a lineage wouldn't dare to do this. But now, the human youth named Xueqi had killed tens of thousands of soldiers of the teeming Marquis. Moreover, he even ate the Marquis tendon in front of the crowd. This was too much to take in. Is he a virtuous paragon? A cultivator calmed down and shuddered. Even if he isn't a paragon, he must be a heaven's equal king. However, it was trapped by Xueqi's fingers and wouldn't budge, so her summoning was useless. Die! A cold glint flashed across Xueqi's eyes. a glint that cut straight to the heart. My master is the divine queen. She knew that the situation wasn't favorable and screamed out in order to use her backing. However, she had yet to finish speaking when the sound of something being pierced came about. The hairpin had instantly shot through her skull. A bloody hole appeared as a string of blood began to flow. Her eyes were still wide open as her body slowly fell down. Not even in her wildest dreams did she expect someone would actually dare to kill her. Junior! Her followers regained their sanity and shouted at the same time before lunging at Xueqi. Roar! The shark cried out. With a popping sound, it swallowed all of these followers in one gulp. The coral forest went quiet right away. All of the cultivators here felt pressured and glanced at each other. Not long before this, Xueqi was massacring the teeming sea tribe. Now, he even killed Gongsun Qianer. This was not only offending the teeming tribe but also the 4 branches of Guchun. What a domineering and arrogant showing. Dao attendant Lin and Yen Yonglong were astonished as well. This was doubly true for the attendant. His heart felt cold since he didn't expect this human junior to be so powerful. Chapter 1202. Untethered vessel. Xueqi ignored the others and remounted the archdevil armored shark before shouting, "Go!" With that, the shark issued a roar and rushed for the bottomless trench before disappearing into its dark abyss. What does he want to do? A while later, many people calmed down and began to murmur among themselves. Yi Tu's and Tang Jiwen's minds returned as well. It was already too late when they thought about following him. In fact, the two of them couldn't catch up to the shark's speed anyway. Yi Tu looked at Tang Jiwen and asked, "What is this about?" Tang Jiwen replied by shaking his head. "I don't know either. His actions aren't something you and me can speculate. Maybe it has something to do with the sea-crossing shuttle. We will have to wait until he returns to find out." Tang Jiwen had learned about the shark from an ancient scroll from his citadel. However, he didn't truly understand the mysteries involved. Xueqi made the shark go to the deepest part of the trench. Its depth was truly of an unfathomable magnitude. Some even said that there was no bottom. Who knew where its base was located? The shark cut through the trench's waves for a long time. Crash! Eventually, it slammed into a cliff and swiftly rushed inside. At this moment, splashing sounds came about, as if the shark had just leaped out of the sea and into the sky. It entered a different space, a lonely space without stars, a sun or a moon. Only the coldness of the void existed here. Not even time was present. It was a land of eternal banishment. In this chilling space was a huge naval shuttle seemingly capable of freely crossing through the ocean. It had an ancient bronze hue, as if it was cast from plain bronze. It had been in this icy void for so long that it was covered with patina, and was near the point of rusting. This gigantic shuttle had 2 doors to its left and right with many runes and totems on them. They were too archaic to be understood. Outside of the 4 doors, nothing else could be found. Alas, the ship wouldn't be particularly eye-catching if placed anywhere else. However, Xueqi was attracted by this shuttle. His gaze tightly toured over it before murmuring, "Oh, my untethered vessel. How can the world know your worth? Only those who don't understand your value would call you the sea-crossing shuttle." People in the heaven spirit world had spotted this vessel before, and not on just one occasion. These people gave it the name Sea-Crossing Shuttle. The name meant that it could be used to traverse through the bottomless trench, but no one knew if this was true or not. Most of them were ordinary disciples from large and small sects alike. Some were even vagabonds, so they didn't know what this huge shuttle was. Sea-Crossing Shuttle. Eventually, an old cultivator who looked like an old mortal shouted, "It is the legendary Sea-Crossing Shuttle. It is here again." What is this Sea-Crossing Shuttle? Other cultivators were still lost after hearing this old man. They had never heard this name before, let alone knowing what it was about. According to legend, the sea-crossing shuttle can reach the Charming Fragmented Realm. Charming Fragmented Realm. Dao attendant Lin and Yen Yonglong from the great lineages were astounded to hear this. They finally knew what this ship ahead was. They turned and left in order to send messages to their sects about the appearance of the shuttle. Chapter 1203. Charming Fragmented Realm. News of the shuttle's appearance quickly spread across the entire Jade Sea to the corners of the heaven spirit world. Many cultivators were moved by this information. Many great lineages sent disciples to the coral forest. They had their own speculations regarding this matter. Of course, there were some sects who had no interest in this matter and didn't send out any disciples. A sect master from a lineage that was interested in the matter murmured, "Wow, the sea-crossing shuttle is back. It is capable of reaching the fragmented realm and hasn't appeared for generations. What is the meaning behind this? Does this mean that some mysteries will be solved?" In a powerful lineage that didn't want to participate, an old virtuous paragon shook his head and said, "So what about the shuttle? And the same goes for the fragmented realm. It would be a fruitless trip since that place has already become mere ruins." An expert under his faction spoke, "But I heard when immortal Emperor Guchun was young, he went there and obtained a supreme fortune, the source of the charming spirits." Li Qie replied, "There are too many things people don't know in this world." Yi Tu glanced at the shuttle and asked, "Where do they lead?" "They have never been opened." Li Qie slowly spoke, "As for their destinations, who knows? The world will find out once they open. Of course that day might never come." Li Qie knew full well that it wasn't easy to open the other 3 doors of the shuttle. In fact, when the time was ripe, they would open by themselves. However, everything would change when that day comes. Li Qie spoke, "Come, let us enter. After finding what I need, I will still have to see your ancestral whale." After hearing this, the duo was quite moved because the Whale of the Void Imperfection 3 schools was too mysterious and full of legends. However, few had seen it. At the very least, they were not qualified to see it. The 2 of them followed him into the portal. A world unraveled before them. It was a fragmented world full of questions. Here, the mountains were either shattered or torn asunder. The earth was split by shocking scars everywhere. Even the oceans here had boiled into deserts. Up in the sky, gigantic peaks had been pulled down by universal laws. Enormous stars from up above fell onto the ground. From these individual scenes, one could imagine the horrifying events that transpired here. It could have been a natural disaster or a heaven-shattering war. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.